Story 1.
My wife looked me dead in the eye and told me that going through her phone was a worse betrayal than the 6 months of explicit messages I found between her and her former student. Let that satisfying delusion sink in for a second. So here's what happened. I caught my wife having an affair with a guy she'd been grooming since he sat in her classroom. I sent every filthy message to his rich wife, and within 72 hours, her billionaire father was dismantling this kid's entire life, while my wife was still out there telling people, I'd be crawling back any day now. She miscalculated badly. I'm 37 male. My wife is Kate, 35, a teacher who apparently never stopped mentoring her favorite student. The affair partner is Rumi, 28, married to Priya, whose father, Victor, is the kind of wealthy man who doesn't yell, he litigates. My buddy Derek is the one who lit the fuse when he called me stammering about what he'd just seen at a downtown restaurant. And me, I'm the husband who never wanted to play dirty but ended up outplaying every single one of them. Let me back up and give you the full picture, because none of this makes sense without understanding what Kate and I were before Derek's phone call blew it apart. We'd been married 4 years, together 6. Kate taught English at a well-regarded private high school, and she was genuinely good at it, the kind of teacher students remembered a decade later. I worked in commercial real estate, boring but stable, and between the two of us, we'd built something comfortable. A 3-bedroom house with a yard that was too big for 2 people, but perfect for the kids we kept saying we'd have next year. Date nights on Thursdays. A shared Netflix queue. The whole quiet architecture of a life that looks unremarkable from the outside, but feels like home when you're inside it. I loved her. That's not complicated. That's just the truth I have to say out loud before the rest of this story makes me sound like I never did. Now. Derek? He called me on a Tuesday evening. I was grilling chicken thighs on the back patio, and when I picked up, there was this long pause, the kind of silence that has weight to it. Derek is not a man who hesitates. He once told our college roommate to his face that his girlfriend was stealing from him. But that night, he sounded like someone trying to defuse a bomb with his voice. Hey man, so I was at Luca's downtown for Sarah's birthday thing. Okay, Kate was there. My hand stopped turning the tongs. Not because that was alarming, Kate went out with friends all the time, but because of what his voice was doing. The way it kept dipping, like each word cost him something. She wasn't alone, brother. He described it in fragments. Kate in a corner booth, a younger guy, his hand on her thigh, not casually, possessively. Her leaning into him, laughing with her whole body the way she used to laugh with me in our first year. Derek said they kissed. Not a peck, not ambiguous, the kind of kiss that makes strangers look away. I wanted to come over to your place right then, Derek said, but I didn't know if I was making it bigger than, you're not making it bigger. I knew. Somewhere beneath the denial already assembling itself in my brain, I knew. Because when Kate came home that night, she told me she'd been at a coworker's wine tasting. She described the wines. She described the cheese board. She described a funny story about someone's husband. The level of detail was immaculate, the kind of specificity that only liars provide because truth tellers don't need to convince you. She never mentioned a restaurant. She never mentioned a man. That silence was louder than anything, Derek told me. I waited 3 days. I smiled at breakfast. I kissed her goodbye for work. I sat through a Thursday date night at our usual Italian place and watched her face for cracks while she talked about a student's college essay. Nothing. She was flawless. And that's what terrified me, how natural deception looked on her. Friday night, Kate fell asleep on the couch during a movie, her phone on the coffee table face down. I stared at it for 11 minutes. I know because the movie's runtime was ticking in the corner of the screen. 11 minutes of arguing with myself about privacy, about trust, about whether I was becoming the paranoid husband who ruins a good thing over a friend's misunderstanding. Then I picked it up. Her passcode was our anniversary. That detail still burns. I found the contact listed as Rumi16. Not Rumi, not a normal name entry. Rumi16, like a username, like a code designed to look meaningless if you scrolled past it. I didn't scroll past it. 6 months of messages. The first few were almost sweet inside jokes, references to books, the kind of intellectual flirtation Kate would have called mentorship if cornered. But they escalated fast. By month 2, the messages were explicit in a way that made my stomach physically contract. Descriptions of what they'd done. Plans for what they'd do next. Photos I will never unsee. And then I found the detail that turned heartbreak into something colder. Rumi had been her student. Not a college peer, not a colleague, a 17-year-old boy in her classroom. The 16 inches his contact name wasn't random. It was the year 2016, when he was in her class. The messages referenced their history, joked about how far they'd come since the back row. Kate's previous relationship, the one before me, the one she said ended because her ex was emotionally unavailable, had ended because of Rumi. She'd been circling this man for a decade. I exported everything. Every message, every photo, every timestamp. I emailed the files to myself, deleted the scent record, and put her phone back on the coffee table. Then I sat in our dark kitchen for 2 hours, feeling something harden behind my ribs, like wet concrete setting. Saturday morning, I confronted her. I expected tears, begging. The standard playbook. Instead, Kate's face cycled through surprise, then irritation, then something I can only describe as righteous fury directed entirely at me. You went through my phone. You've been sleeping with your former student for 6 months. You violated my privacy, and you want to talk about Kate. 6 months. She stood up from the kitchen table, grabbed her keys, and said the sentence that sealed her fate: "You'll be calling me by Monday, begging me to come home. I guarantee it." The door slammed. Her car started. And I sat there, jaw tight, already composing an email to Priya. I wanted to meet her and reveal everything, but I didn't make the move because it would have looked creepy. Some strange man showing up at a woman's door claiming her husband was a cheat. So I asked around, found Priya's email through Rumi's barely private social media, and sent it to her. Everything. The full export. She responded within an hour times. "How did you discover the truth?" asterisk. I told her everything in detail. I told her to read the messages carefully, and she would get all the clarity she needed. After a couple of hours, she responded asking if I had confronted Kate. I said yes. She said that she would involve her father to deal with Rumi and went offline. That was Wednesday. By Saturday, Priya was still gone. No responses. No read receipts. Nothing. I'm trying to reach out to her through all their social media accounts, mutual contacts, anything with a digital pulse. Because Rumi is using her for her father's money. I saw that clearly in the messages, the way he talked about the lifestyle and Victor's connections, and I'm terrified of what a cornered man does when his meal ticket starts. Asking questions. Meanwhile, Kate hasn't signed a single document. She's told her mother Gloria that I'm having a breakdown. She's told colleagues at the school that times I, times cheated on, times her asterisk. And 3 days ago, she sent me a text that read, "Times I want the house. My lawyer says I'll get it. Asterisk." She still thinks she's winning. What she doesn't know is that Victor Sandoval has already made his first phone call. Priya resurfaced on a Monday, not with a message, with a phone call. Her voice was flat and controlled the way people sound when they've cried so much their body has simply stopped producing the chemicals for it. "I'm safe," she said. "My father's been handling things. I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed to be somewhere. Rumi couldn't reach me." The relief hit me so hard my knees softened. I'd been imagining headlines. I'd been imagining police reports. What's happening with him? "My father doesn't do things emotionally," Priya said. "He does them permanently." She explained it in pieces, the way you describe a car accident out of order, with strange details made vivid by shock. Victor Sandoval had spent the silent week not confronting Rumi, not yelling, not even acknowledging anything was wrong. Instead, he'd had his forensic accountant pull every financial record from the consulting firm where Rumi worked, the firm Victor's investment group had a controlling interest in. The firm Rumi had been hired into, I now understood, not because of talent, but because of marriage. What the accountant found wasn't planted. It didn't need to be. Rumi had been skimming. Small amounts routed through vendor invoices that didn't correspond to real vendors, padded expense reports for client dinners that never happened, the kind of petty graft that a man with a rich father-in-law commits because he believes the money is functionally his anyway. Victor had compiled it into a criminal referral. Embezzlement. Fraud. Wire fraud because some of the invoices cross state lines. Federal wire fraud. My father told Rumi's attorney that he has 2 options, Priya said. Full restitution, resignation, and an uncontested divorce, giving me everything. Or prosecution. Jesus. Rumi called it blackmail. My father's lawyer called it a courtesy notification of intended legal action. There's a difference, apparently, when you can afford the right vocabulary. I sat with that for a moment. Victor Sandoval hadn't fought with emotion. He'd fought with accountants and attorneys exactly as Priya had predicted. Rumi's charm, his easy smile, his talent for making women feel like the only person in the room, none of it mattered against a spreadsheet. Then Priya said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Rumi called me yesterday. He doesn't know I told my father about Kate. He thinks this is about the money. He actually asked me. Her voice cracked for the first time. He asked me to talk to my father, to smooth things over. He said he loved me. The dramatic irony was so thick I could taste it. Rumi scrambling to save his marriage to the woman whose father was destroying him times of the affair he didn't know she'd discovered. He thought Kate was irrelevant. He thought this was a financial audit gone wrong. He also asked if I knew you, Priya added quietly. What? He asked if some man named He Used Your Full Name had contacted me. He said Kate warned him you might try something crazy. He wanted to know if you'd reached out. I almost laughed. Almost. What did you tell him? Nothing. I hung up. Kate's campaign, meanwhile, had been escalating. She'd moved in with Gloria, who initially treated me like I'd had a psychotic episode. Kate had told her mother I'd become controlling and paranoid, that I'd fabricated evidence that I was trying to isolate her. Gloria called me once, her voice trembling with protective fury, and said, "She is my daughter and I know her." I said, "Gloria, I'm going to send you something. You don't have to read it, but if you love her, you should." I sent Gloria a curated selection, nothing explicit, nothing designed to humiliate, just enough to show the timeline, the pet names, the references to hotel rooms on nights Kate had told me she was grading papers. Gloria never called me again. But 2 days later, Kate texted me times, "You turned my own mother against me. You're sick." Asterisk. At the school, Kate had been more strategic. She'd told select colleagues that I had cheated, that I was vindictive, that the divorce was my fault. She was building a narrative fortress brick by brick, and I was watching it rise from across the street, knowing exactly how to bring it down. My lawyer said, "Don't." My lawyer said we had the house, we had the prenups, infidelity clause, we had everything we needed for a clean divorce. Kate refused to sign. Her counter-demand the house 60% of shared assets and spousal support. Her lawyer sent a letter claiming I had engaged in emotional abuse and surveillance. She wanted to go to trial. She wanted a stage, so I gave her one. I sent the explicit messages redacted of photos but not of content to the head of Kate's department. Not to students, not to parents, to the one administrator who would understand exactly what "since the back row" meant. Who would understand that Roomie16 wasn't a username, it was a timestamp. The school launched an internal review within 48 hours. Kate was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Her colleagues, the same ones she'd recruited into her narrative, went quiet with the specific silence of people recalculating which side of history they're standing on. Kate called me that night. Not texted. Called. "You'll never work in this town again," she said, her voice vibrating. "Sign the papers, Kate. I will destroy. Sign the papers. Or the unredacted versions go to the Parents Association, the school board, and every platform where your students might see exactly who mentored them." Silence. The kind that has weight to it. She signed on Thursday. The divorce finalized 6 weeks later. I kept the house. She kept nothing she demanded. Rumi, last I heard from Priya, had accepted Victor's terms: full restitution, resignation, uncontested divorce. The alternative was a federal courtroom and a public record that would follow him into every job interview for the rest of his life. Priya messaged me once more after it was done. Asterisk, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I hope you find peace." Asterisk, I told her I hoped the same for her. Then I archived the conversation and deleted her number. Not out of coldness, out of necessity. She was a reminder of the worst chapter, and I couldn't keep rereading it. Gloria never spoke to me again. I don't blame her. Loving your child doesn't require liking what they've done, but it does require choosing them, and she chose. I sold the grill. The one I'd been standing at when Derek called. It was a good grill, but every time I looked at it, I heard that weighted pause before he said her name. I booked a trip to Montana. Solo. No Vegas, no beach resort, no performative post-divorce reinvention. Just mountains, cold air, and the kind of silence that doesn't have weight to it, the kind that's just silence. The man who never wanted to play dirty walked away having outplayed everyone. And the woman who guaranteed I'd come begging by Monday learned something that should have been obvious from the start. No one is untouchable, especially not the people who are certain they are.
Story 2.
My mother-in-law told me I disgraced her family's genetics by existing. At her husband's birthday party, in front of 40 relatives, while standing in a house I paid for. So here's the situation. My in-laws worship beauty like a religion, and I was their heresy. They lived rent-free in a home I bought, mocked me daily for my appearance, and when I finally asked for basic respect, they chose homelessness over apologizing. Then their golden child daughter dumped them in a care facility, and suddenly the ugly daughter-in-law was the only phone number worth dialing. I'm 31 female and apparently not pretty enough to deserve gratitude. My husband is Lior, 31, the only one in his family who sees people instead of faces. His mother is Vivian, 61, a woman who weaponized beauty her entire life. His father, Gerald, 65, enabled every cruel word. And his sister, Nadine, 34, played the devoted daughter right up until devotion got inconvenient. The thing about marrying into the Ashford family is that nobody warns you. The audition never ends. I met Lior at a hospital fundraiser. I was there because I had organized it. He was there because his company had donated imaging equipment. He asked me to dinner that night, and I said yes, because he looked at me like I was already enough. I didn't know then that his family operated on an entirely different metric. Vivienne had been a catalog model in the 80s, not famous regional. Department store circulars, the occasional magazine spread for a mid-tier jewelry brand. But she'd built an identity around it that calcified into doctrine. Beauty was virtue. Beauty was proof of worth. She passed this gospel to Nadine, who inherited her mother's cheekbones and wielded them like credentials, and to Lior, who quietly rejected it and never told anyone why. The first time I met Vivienne, she held my face between her manicured fingers and turned it side to side like she was inspecting fruit at a market. Interesting bone structure, she said, which I later learned was the most generous thing she'd ever say about me. We married small. Vivienne wore black. The house situation started 2 years before Gerald's birthday party. Lior and I had been married for a year when his parents' financial situation collapsed. Gerald's investment portfolio imploded bad bets on speculative real estate, compounded by pride that prevented him from pulling out early. They were about to lose their home. Vivienne called Lior sobbing, and Lior called me. Here's what people don't understand. I didn't help because I was naive. I helped because my own parents taught me that family means showing up even when it costs you. My father had worked 32 years in municipal water management, so my mother could stay home with my disabled brother. Sacrifice wasn't abstract to me. It was Tuesday. I had savings, substantial savings earmarked for my parents' retirement care. I redirected 85% of it toward the EMI on a house in Vivienne and Gerald's neighborhood, a house Lior had been about to sell because he couldn't carry the payments alone. I covered it. We transferred ownership to my name because that was the legal reality of who was paying. And then we moved his parents in, rent-free, no questions asked. For 3 years, I said nothing. Not when Vivienne rearranged the furniture I'd chosen and told guests it was her home. Not when Gerald referred to me as Lior's wife instead of my name at family dinners, as if naming me would make my presence too real. Not when Nadine visited every other Sunday and the three of them would sit in the living room speaking French, a language I don't speak, while I prepared food in the kitchen. I said nothing because I believed grace was cumulative, that eventually the sheer weight of my kindness would crack something open in them. I was wrong. Gerald's 65th birthday. 42 relatives packed into the house. My house and Vivienne had spent 3 weeks planning it like a state dinner. I'd funded the catering. I'd taken 2 days off work to help set up. I was carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres through the living room when I heard my name. Not my name. What Vivienne called me when she thought I couldn't hear. That weird-looking girl has disgraced this family's genetics just by existing. Look at her. Look at my son. People ask me if she's his Times assistant, asterisk. Laughter. Not all 42 relatives. But enough. I stopped walking. The tray trembled in my hands. Vivienne saw me and didn't flinch. She Times straightened, asterisk. Oh, good, you heard. Maybe now you'll understand why I keep asking Lior to reconsider. The room went silent. I set the tray down on the nearest table with a steadiness that surprised even me, and I walked out. Not dramatically. Not crying. I just left. I sat in my car for 40 minutes and stared at the steering wheel until my hands stopped shaking. That night, I told Lior I wanted the house back. He didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. He called a family meeting the following weekend and laid it out, apologized to my wife, or vacate her property. Gerald intervened first. You don't have to be her puppet for that. You married her, and now she is doing her duty. Don't put her on a pedestal. Lior snapped. His voice cracked with something I'd never heard from him. Not anger exactly, but the sound of a man realizing his father had never once seen him clearly. I times respect times her for everything, and you should also respect her because she has let you live in her house for the last 3 years and never said a word. The silence that followed was surgical. They were shocked to know the house was mine. Lior told them the truth, that he'd been about to sell when I saved it, paid for 85% of the EMI, and that he'd transferred ownership to my name because it was the right thing to do. They didn't apologize. They didn't even blink toward remorse. Lior asked them directly. Apologize to her. Vivienne's lip curled. A times simp, asterisk. My own son, a simp. It was her duty to help her husband at bad times. That's what wives do. That's not charity. That's obligation. Gerald nodded. Nadine on speakerphone said nothing, which was its own kind of vote. Then leave, Lior said quietly. And they did. Vivienne packed 3 suitcases, Gerald loaded them into Nadine's car, and they drove away from a house they didn't own, toward a daughter whose devotion had an expiration date they couldn't yet read. 2 weeks of silence followed. Then, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. The front window of the living room. A brick wrapped in a page torn from one of Vivienne's old modeling composites, her face at 23 jaw, tilted eyes full of a confidence that had curdled into cruelty over 40 years. No note. None was needed. Lior found me standing in the hallway in bare feet glass, glittering across the hardwood like scattered teeth. He pulled me back before I stepped forward. Don't move, he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had just understood something final. The police came. Filed a report. Insufficient evidence, they said, though. The composite page told its own story. 2 nights later, my father, who had been staying with us while we prepared his room, found Gerald standing on the sidewalk at dusk, staring at the house. Not approaching, just standing. My father, 71 years old with a replaced hip and a heart condition, went outside to ask if he needed something. Gerald told him his daughter had married above her station, and that the house would come back to the Ashfords one way or another. My father came inside and sat down at the kitchen table and didn't speak for an hour. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wet, and he said, "I didn't raise you to be treated like this." That sentence broke something in me that Vivian's public humiliation hadn't, because my father had never once complained. Not when he worked double shifts, not when my brother's care costs consumed every vacation they might have taken. He had absorbed difficulty like soil absorbs rain, quietly, completely. And now, this man who had earned every ounce of peace I was trying to give him was being terrorized on a sidewalk by someone whose mortgage I had paid. I filed for the restraining order the next morning. The renovation took 3 months. I gutted the bathroom on the ground floor and rebuilt it with grab bars, a walk-in shower, a seat. I widened the door frames. I installed a ramp at the side entrance. Every modification was a sentence in a language Vivian would never understand. Times, "This is what love looks like when it isn't performed for an audience." Asterisk. My father moved in on a Saturday. He stood in the doorway of his room and touched the wall like he was confirming it was real. "This is mine," he asked. "This is yours." He unpacked a single framed photo of my mother, gone 4 years now, and set it on the nightstand, and that was enough. That was the whole ceremony. Lior severed contact with his parents formally, not through a dramatic phone call, through a letter handwritten 3 paragraphs long. I didn't read it. He didn't offer, but when he sealed the envelope, his hands were steady and his jaw was set in a way that told me the decision had been made long before the pen touched paper. The boy who had quietly rejected his mother's gospel of beauty had finally said so out loud. A year passed. I learned what happened next, not from Lior, not from Vivienne or Gerald, but from a cousin of Lior's named Mark, who called one evening with the careful tone people use when delivering news they find both terrible and inevitable. Nadine had moved her parents into Cedarbrook Assisted Living. Not gradually, not after a medical event. She'd simply informed them one morning that the arrangement wasn't working. Her boyfriend didn't like the tension, her apartment was too small, their presence was affecting her energy. She drove them to the facility, signed the intake paperwork, and left before lunch. Mark said Gerald had stood in the lobby holding his suitcase looking at the door Nadine had walked through and hadn't moved for 15 minutes. I set the phone down after the call and sat with the information. I expected to feel vindicated. I searched for it, that hot, righteous bloom of times I told you so, asterisk. It wasn't there. What I felt instead was a dull, familiar ache. The same ache I'd felt carrying that tray through the living room. The same ache I'd felt sitting in my car for 40 minutes. Not anger. Grief for people who couldn't stop destroying the bridges they stood on. Lior took it harder. He didn't cry. He went for a run at 10 o'clock at night and came back an hour later and stood in the shower until the water went cold. I didn't ask. I just left a towel on the hook and the hallway light on. Mark told me one more thing. Vivienne in the facility had been heard telling another resident that her son had been stolen by an ugly woman who tricked him and brought him to the streets, that the house had been taken from them, that they were victims of ingratitude. She was still performing, still curating the narrative. Even in a room she didn't choose surrounded by bodies that time, was softening and folding and diminishing the very process she'd spent a lifetime treating as moral failure she could not stop. Gerald, Mark said, mostly sat by the window. I asked Mark if they'd ever mentioned apologizing. He went quiet long enough that I knew the answer. No, he said, not once. I thanked him and hung up. That night I checked on my father. He was asleep in his accessible room in the house I'd paid for under a roof that nobody would take from him. My mother's photo watched from the nightstand. The grab bars gleamed faintly in the hallway light. I closed his door gently and stood there for a moment, my hand still on the knob. The Ashfords had worshipped beauty like it was a savings account, something that would compound and protect them. But beauty doesn't compound. It spends. And when it's gone, what's left is only what you built with your hands and your choices and your willingness to love people who couldn't love you back. I had built this. They had built Cedarbrook. And the ugliest thing in the whole story was that they would never ever see it.
Story 3.
The one responsible thing my wife did after cheating on me became the exact thing that ended our marriage. She got an STD test to protect me, and that single act of conscience was the receipt I never asked for but couldn't unsee. So here's what happened. My wife went to Vegas for a friend's bachelorette week, came back a different person, and I found a hospital bill for an STD screening hidden in her purse. She confessed everything. and I made her believe that confessing to our families would save us, but what she didn't know was that I already had divorce papers in my back pocket. The confession wasn't reconciliation. It was sentencing. I'm 37 male. My wife is Dove, also 37, 16 years together, gone. Priya is the bride whose bachelorette party started all of this. Arjun is my divorce lawyer, an old school junior. And Neil is my best friend who let me crash at his place, recently divorced himself, so he knew the drill. Dove and I met when we were 21. College sweethearts, the kind people point to at weddings and say, times see it does happen, asterisk. 16 years. A son. A house with a garden she designed herself, every plant chosen because it meant something. Jasmine for devotion. Lavender for calm. I used to joke that our backyard was a love letter I couldn't read. I need you to understand that before I tell you what she did. The Vegas trip was Priya's idea. Priya, who I'd met exactly twice, and both times left the conversation feeling like I'd been assessed and dismissed. She was Dove's school friend, the kind of friend who resurfaces every few years, with an energy that rearranges the furniture in your wife's personality. When Dove told me it was a full week in Vegas for Priya's bachelorette, I raised an eyebrow. 1 week seemed excessive. Dove laughed and said Priya doesn't do anything small. I said fine. I trusted her. That's not a figure of speech. I trusted Dove the way you trust the ground beneath your feet. You don't think about it. You just walk. She flew out on a Saturday. The first 2 days, normal texts. Photos of the group at dinner at the pool, matching robes. Day 3, the texts got shorter. Day 4, she called me at midnight, voice thick, and said she missed me. Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten, but I told myself it was wine and distance. Day 5, almost nothing. Day 6, a single heart emoji at 11 p.m. Day 7, she came home. I picked her up at the airport. She hugged me like she was trying to climb inside my ribcage, and then she pulled away too fast. In the car, she stared out the window. I asked about the trip. She said it was fun. I asked about Priya. She said Priya was happy. I asked if something was wrong. She said she was just tired. That night, I reached for her in bed. She flinched. Actually flinched. Her shoulder jerked away from my hand like I'd touched a burn. She apologized immediately, said her back was sore from the flight. I let it go. 3 days passed. She moved through the house like a ghost, wearing my wife's clothes. Cooked dinner but didn't eat. Played with our son, but her laughter had a half-second delay, like she was translating from a language she'd forgotten. She showered twice a day, long showers, door locked, which she'd never done. And she wouldn't look at me. Not really. Her eyes would land somewhere near my face and slide off like I was too bright to stare at directly. On the 4th day, I found it. I wasn't snooping. I want that on the record. She'd asked me to grab her wallet from her purse because the delivery guy was at the door. I opened the bag, moved aside, a makeup pouch, and there it was. A folded hospital bill from a clinic 15 minutes from our house. STD panel. Comprehensive. Booked. The day after she landed. My hands went still. The delivery guy rang the bell again. I stood in our hallway holding that piece of paper, and the house went completely silent inside my skull, like someone had pulled a plug. I paid for the food. I put the bill back exactly where I found it. I ate dinner across from her and tasted nothing. That night, I lay beside her and stared at the ceiling for 6 hours straight. The next morning, I started looking. Her phone, nothing. She'd wiped it clean, which was itself a confession. Her Instagram DMs, nothing. Her call log, nothing except a 40-minute call to Priya the night she came back. I checked our shared credit card. Normal charges, restaurants, a spa, a club. Nothing that screamed infidelity, but the STD test screamed it. One piece of evidence sitting alone in a field of silence louder than 100 texts could have been. I went online. I read forums, threads, stories from men who'd found exactly what I found. The pattern was surgical in its consistency, the distance, the flinching, the excessive showering, the phone wipe. I wasn't special. I wasn't an exception. I was a statistic. By the 5th night, I couldn't carry it anymore. We were at the dinner table. Our son was at my mother's for the evening. Dove was pushing rice around her plate, and I watched her hand tremble just slightly, just enough, and I felt something in me snap clean through. How was your STD test? 4 words. Her fork stopped midair. The color left her face in a wave top to bottom like watching a tide go out. She didn't ask times, "What are you talking about?" asterisk. She didn't deny it. She set the fork down with a precision that told me she'd been rehearsing this moment in her head for days. And then she told me everything. The bachelorette group went to a male strip club. Priya's idea. Things escalated. Private rooms. An intimate massage that Dove swore she tried to stop, but didn't. And then because she told herself the line was already crossed, she didn't stop what came after either. One night, one man. She said his name and I held up my hand because I physically could not hear it. She was sobbing, shaking. She said Priya had pressured everyone that she'd been drinking, that she hated herself, that getting the test was the first thing she did because she couldn't bear the thought of hurting me that way too. I sat there, very still. And behind the devastation, something cold and architectural was already forming in my mind. The next evening, Arjun, my old school junior, now a divorce lawyer, asked me to meet for a drink. So the last evening, Dove confessed her cheating, and the next evening, I was sitting with my lawyer and discussing my divorce. He asked me to sleep over my decision and see if the emotion subsided, and I decided to give her a chance. I told him that I was mindfully making this decision. I relayed my divorce terms to him, and he assured me of starting the paperwork immediately. I requested him to fast-track the process because I want to get done with it as soon as possible. Anyone who heard me would have assumed I was making an impulsive decision, but I was not. I love Dove, but not more than my self-respect. I told him that I trusted Dove with my life, and if I'm taking this decision, it is definitely severe. I cannot let her get away with the cheating. The papers would be ready in 72 hours. I drove home. Dove was sitting on the couch, eyes swollen, waiting. She asked if I'd left her. I sat down beside her. I took her hand, and I told her there was a way we could survive this, but only if she was brave enough to confess everything in person to both our families. Her eyes searched my face for the trap. She didn't find it. She said yes. I spent the next 3 days being the husband she thought she still had. I cooked for her. I let her fall asleep with her head on my shoulder while we watched television. On the second night, she reached for me in bed, tentative, trembling, her fingers tracing my collarbone like she was asking permission to exist near me, and I let her. I held her afterward while she cried into my chest and whispered times, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," times like a prayer she'd been saving. I stroked her hair and stared at the wall behind her and felt absolutely nothing. That's not true. I felt something. I felt the architectural thing, the cold scaffolding I'd been building since the dinner table lock into its final position. On the third morning, Arjun texted me a single word times, ready, asterisk. I called both sets of parents that afternoon. Told them we needed a family sit-down, something important. My mother asked if everything was okay. I said Dove and I had something to share. Dove's mother asked the same question, and Dove, standing beside me gripping the kitchen counter, said yes, everything would be okay, that this was about healing. Healing. She actually used that word. We held it at our house, the garden house. Jasmine and lavender in full bloom outside the windows, the whole backyard, exhaling devotion and calm, while I arranged chairs in the living room like a courtroom gallery. My parents arrived first, then hers. Her father shook my hand at the door and said, "Whatever this is, I'm glad you two are facing it together." I smiled at him. I have never hated myself more than in that specific smile. Dove sat in the center of the room. I sat beside her, close supportive, my hand on her knee. The families watched us, with the nervous reverence people reserve for couples announcing pregnancies or diagnoses. Dove looked at me. I nodded. She began. She told them everything. The strip club, the private room, the massage that became something else, the man whose name I still cannot hear. She told them about the drinking, about Priya's pressure, about the moment she decided the line was already crossed, so she might as well keep walking. She told them about the STD test, that she'd gotten it immediately, that she'd wanted to protect me even while destroying me. She told them she was sorry. She told them she loved me. She told them I had given her the chance to earn forgiveness by being honest here, in front of everyone, and that she was taking it because I was the only thing in her life worth being brave for. Her mother was crying. Her father's jaw was set so tight I could see the vein in his temple. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father stared at the floor. Dove finished. She turned to me, eyes raw, face open, and she looked, "God help me," times relieved, asterisk, like she'd climbed the mountain, like the worst was over. I reached into the bag beside my chair and pulled out the envelope. "These are the divorce papers," I said. Arjun drafted them. "The terms are fair. I'm not asking for the house. I'm not contesting custody. We'll share it equally. I want this settled in 45 days. The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt. It simply stopped the way a heart stops, one moment of rhythm, and then silence so complete you can hear the blood settling. Dove stared at the envelope, then at me, then at the envelope again. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I watched her eyes track backward through the last 3 days, the cooking, the shoulder, the night in bed, the times, thank you, thank you, thank you times, and I watched her understand. "You planned this," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She signed immediately. No argument, no negotiation, no scene. She took the pen from the table, opened to the flagged pages, and signed her name in handwriting so steady it terrified me. Then she set the pen down, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. The door closed with a click. Her parents left without speaking to me. Her father paused at the threshold and looked back, not with anger, but with something worse. Recognition. Like he understood exactly what I'd done and exactly why, and the understanding gave him no comfort at all. My mother touched my arm and said, "Was this necessary?" I said yes. She didn't ask again. The divorce settled in 45 days. Uncontested. Arjun handled everything with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd seen the surgery before and knew which cuts were clean and which ones scarred. Dove and I communicated through lawyers. She never called. Never texted. Never showed up at Neil's apartment where I'd been sleeping on an air mattress surrounded by another man's divorce boxes. The silence from her was so total it had its own weight, its own weather. We passed each other once at the courthouse. She was wearing the blue kurta I'd bought her for our anniversary. I don't know if that was deliberate. I don't know which answer would be worse. She looked at me. Times looked not the sliding off gaze from before, and I saw something in her face that I will carry until I die. Not hatred, not grief. Comprehension. She understood me completely, finally, and the understanding was the loneliest thing I'd ever seen. I drove home Neil's home and sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes. Here is what I know. I love Dove. I love Dove. Those are not contradictory statements, and they do not change anything. I engineered her humiliation in front of the people she loved most because I needed her to feel publicly and irreversibly the weight of what she'd done. I told myself it was self-respect. Maybe it was. Maybe self-respect and cruelty share a border so thin you can't see it until you've already crossed. My son starts kindergarten in September. He will grow up shuttling between 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 versions of why mommy and daddy don't live together anymore. I will have to build him an answer that doesn't include the word times, revenge times, even though some nights alone on that air mattress, I suspect that's exactly what it was. The jasmine in the garden is still blooming. I drove past the house last week. She hasn't pulled it out. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to.
Story 4.
My wife spent over 40 hours crocheting a beautiful handmade shawl for the woman marrying the brother who made her childhood a living hell. The moment that shawl was in their hands, they uninvited her from the wedding. So I walked back into that office and took it right off his desk. My wife Lena was asked by her own mother to make this gift for her older brother George's fiancée Diane. They used Lena for her talent, then discarded her like she was nothing, and when I took the shawl back, the entire family turned on us. But they weren't expecting her brother Michael to pick a side too, and they definitely weren't expecting what happened at that reception. So here's the cast. I'm a guy in my late 30s. My wife is Lena. Her older brother is George. His new wife is Diane. Their mother is Vivian. And then there's Michael, Lena's other brother, and his wife Sarah, the only 2 people in that family who ever actually saw Lena. To understand what happened, you need to understand what Lena's childhood looked like. Because this wasn't a one-time slight. This was a pattern so deeply grooved into her family's behavior that they didn't even see it as cruelty anymore. They saw it as normal. When George graduated from uni, Lena was left at home. She was 8 years old and left home alone all day. Not with a neighbor, not with a babysitter, just left. The whole family, Vivian, George, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they all went to the ceremony, the dinner, the celebration, and Lena sat in an empty house watching cartoons until it got dark and she got scared enough to lock the front door herself. Christmas was spent mostly in her bedroom because her grandmother didn't want Lena around as her presence would just upset George. I need you to read that again. A child was told her presence times was upsetting, not her behavior, not something she did. Her existence in her room was treated as a provocation. So she'd sit upstairs with whatever book she could find while the rest of them opened presents and ate together downstairs until she was 14. Then she would sneak out and spend it with me and my family. That's how I met Lena. She was the girl from 2 streets over who showed up at our door on Christmas Day in a coat that was too thin, holding a tin of biscuits she'd made herself, asking my mom if she could watch telly with us. My mom didn't ask questions that first year. She just pulled up a chair. Lena was just left out of everything. Her dad used to work away from home a lot, so he had no idea what was going on. He just assumed Lena liked being on her own, that she was the quiet type, the independent one. That's the story, Vivian told him. And by the time he figured out the truth years later, after a breakdown Lena had at 19, the damage was architectural. It was load-bearing. You couldn't remove it without the whole thing coming down. George was the golden child. George got the attention, the investment, the protection, and Lena got what was left, which was usually nothing. So when Vivian called 3 months ago and asked Lena to crochet a shawl for Diane, George's fiancée, I watched my wife's face do something I've seen 100 times. This flicker. Hope, then suppression of hope, then a careful neutral expression she's perfected over 37 years of practice. Mom wants me to make something for the wedding, she said, and her voice was light in the way that means it isn't. I didn't say what I wanted to say. I said, "Do you want to?" She said yes. Of course she said yes. She picked out yarn herself. Drove to 3 different shops to find the exact shade of ivory that would match Diane's dress. She watched tutorials for a stitch pattern she'd never tried before, something intricate with a scalloped edge that made her hands cramp after 20 minutes. She worked on it every evening for weeks. I'd come downstairs at midnight and find her on the sofa with her reading glasses on, counting stitches under her breath, and I'd bring her tea and sit with her because I didn't know what else to do. 40 hours. That's what she put into it. 40 hours of her life poured into a gift for a woman she'd met twice, marrying a man who once locked her in a garden shed for 4 hours because she touched his PlayStation controller. The plan was simple. George and I work at the same company, different teams, but same building. Lena didn't want to see him, so Vivian arranged for me to hand the shawl to George at work. Fine, I could do that. I could be civil for 90 seconds. That Monday morning, I found George in the break room. I handed him the bag. Inside was the shawl wrapped in tissue paper with a handwritten card from Lena that said, "Times, wishing you both a beautiful day. With love, Lena." Asterisk. George looked in the bag, nodded, and said, "Tell her thanks." Not Times, thank Lena. Asterisk. Not Times, that's really kind of her. Asterisk. Just Times, tell her thanks. Asterisk. Like I was a courier. I went back to my desk. I did my work. I ate lunch. Normal Monday. Then at 1:30, my phone rang. Lena's voice was doing that thing again. Light in the way, that means it isn't. Diane just called. She said they've had to cut the guest list because of space at the venue, so we're not invited anymore. My hand tightened around the phone. She said she's really sorry and she hopes I understand. I could hear Lena breathing. Controlled. Measured. The breathing of someone who has practiced not crying in front of people since she was old enough to understand that her tears made things worse. When did she call? I asked. About 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes. The shawl had been in George's hands for 5 hours. They waited just long enough to make sure they had it, and then they made the call. I sat at my desk and I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. Cold, absolute clarity. They never wanted Lena at that wedding. They wanted the shawl. They wanted 40 hours of her hands and her heart and her desperate hope that maybe this time would be different, and then they wanted her gone. I told Lena I loved her. I told her I'd be home soon. Then I stood up, walked down the corridor to George's department, and looked at his desk. Empty chair. He'd already left for the day. But sitting right there on the corner of his desk, still in the bag, tissue paper spilling out, was the shawl. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. A colleague glanced up. I didn't care. I picked up the bag, pulled a sticky note from George's own dispenser, and wrote 4 words times, "You don't deserve this," asterisk. I stuck it to his monitor, walked out of the building, and drove home with my wife's shawl on the passenger seat. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the family group chat had already detonated. The group chat was already 40 messages deep by the time I walked through the front door. Lena was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone face down, both hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked up when I came in and her eyes went straight to the bag in my hand. "You took it back," she said. Not a question. I took it back. She pressed her lips together. Her chin did that trembling thing she hates, the one she's been fighting since she was small enough to be sent to her room for having feelings. Then she nodded, once stood up and put her arms around me, and I held my wife in our kitchen while her phone buzzed against the table like something alive and furious. I picked it up. She let me. Vivian had written times that shawl was a gift. You don't give something and take it back. That's not how family works. Asterisk. George times Lena needs to grow up. This is embarrassing. Asterisk. Diane times. I can't believe this is happening 2 weeks before our wedding. We tried to be kind about the guest list, and this is what we get. Asterisk. Then Vivian again times. And I don't want the children thinking this behavior is acceptable. Maybe they should stay with us that weekend so they're not around all this negativity. Asterisk. My jaw locked. She was reaching for our kids now, using them as leverage the way she'd always used, proximity as a weapon, granting it, withholding it, dangling it, like something Lena had to earn. I started typing. Asterisk. This is Lena's husband. Lena didn't take the shawl. I did. She doesn't know I'm writing this, and she'd probably tell me to stop, because that's who she is, someone who has spent her entire life being gracious to people who don't deserve it. The shawl took her 40 hours. She drove to 3 shops to match the color. She stayed up until midnight every night for weeks. And the morning I handed it over, you waited 5 hours to uninvite her. You got what you wanted, and you threw her away. Again. So yes, I took it back. And no, you're not having our children for the weekend. Or any weekend. Asterisk. I put the phone down. Lena was reading over my shoulder. She didn't stop me. The chat went quiet for 11 minutes. I counted. Then Michael. Asterisk. He's right. Asterisk. 2 words. And then times I've watched this my whole life and I've said nothing and I'm done saying nothing. George, you know exactly what you did. Mom, you know exactly what you've always done. Sarah and I won't be at the wedding. Asterisk. Vivian's response was, instant times. Michael, don't you dare. Asterisk. George, times. Are you serious right now? Over a shawl. Asterisk. Michael, times. It was never about the shawl, George. You know that. Asterisk. Then Michael went offline. So did we. The wedding was on a Saturday. Michael texted me that morning times, taking the girls to the aquarium. Lena and the kids should come. Asterisk. So that's what we did. The six of us, me, Lena, R2, Michael, and Sarah, spent the afternoon watching penguins and eating overpriced chips in a cafe that smelled like chlorine and vinegar. Michael's daughter put a plastic starfish clip in Lena's hair, and Lena wore it for 3 hours. Sarah took a photo of all of us outside the gift shop, everyone mid-laugh, because Michael had just walked into a bollard while trying to read the parking sign. Michael posted it that evening. No caption, just the photo. Time-stamped during the wedding reception. I found out later through Sarah, who heard it from a cousin, that George saw it mid-speeches. That he went white, then red, then excused himself from the top table. That Vivian followed him. That there was a scene in the corridor outside the function room that George's new in-laws absolutely witnessed. That Diane's father asked Vivian quite directly what was going on, and Vivian couldn't produce an answer that made sense because the truth times, my daughter wasn't invited to her own brother's wedding because we only needed her for the handmade gift times isn't something you can dress up for strangers. George's reception was ruined. Not by us, by the architecture of 37 years of cruelty finally becoming visible to people who hadn't been trained to look away. The following Monday, I requested a transfer to a different team. My manager didn't ask why. He just looked at me for a moment, said, "Probably wise," and approved it that afternoon. He'd seen the sticky note. He'd heard enough. Michael told us later that week that the venue had a capacity of 140. George and Diane had 93 guests. The space issue was a lie so thin you could read through it. I didn't tell Lena that people online were calling her a doormat or saying she needs to grow a spine. Those people clearly haven't had their spirit completely broken by the people who are meant to love them unconditionally. They haven't been 8 years old, left home alone all day while the whole family celebrates without them. They haven't spent Christmas in their bedroom because their grandmother decided their existence was a provocation. Lena apologized to me. That's the part that still sits in my chest like a stone. She apologized for times being upset, asterisk. She thanked me for taking the shawl back. She said, "I'm sorry, this is all so messy." I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I told her she never had. We went no contact with George, Diane, and Vivian. Changed the locks because Vivian has a key. Blocked numbers. The silence has been strange and clean like the air after a storm pulls through. The shawl is still here. Lena soaked it in indigo dye last weekend, turned it from ivory to this deep, rich blue that makes it look like something entirely new. She's planning to wear it to Christmas at Michael and Sarah's. She had previously suggested that I could wear it too to work when George is back. She was laughing when she said it, actually laughing. I'm going to bring up therapy soon. Not yet. The dust is still settling and she's sleeping through the night for the first time in weeks and I don't want to push. But soon. For 37 years, Lena's family treated her like she was optional. Like she was someone who existed in the margins of their lives, useful when she could produce something invisible when she couldn't. She's not invisible anymore. Not to Michael. Not to Sarah. Not to our kids who will never sit in a bedroom alone on Christmas Day wondering what they did wrong. And not to me. Never to me.
Story 5.
My husband sat me down and told me I needed to quit my job to babysit his grandchild. A grandchild I never agreed to raise in a house I don't even own, while his 25-year-old daughter refuses daycare, refuses a nanny, refuses child support, and refuses to adjust her own schedule. But somehow I'm the selfish one for saying no. So I packed everything I own into my car and drove away from a marriage I'm now realizing was never actually a partnership. I'm a 38-year-old woman, proudly child-free, or at least I was until my life got hijacked. My husband is Sam 47, father of the year to everyone except me. And then there's Leah, his 25-year-old daughter, pregnant, freshly dumped, and absolutely convinced I owe her my entire future. Let me rewind to how this started, because it didn't begin with a bomb. It began with a whisper. Sam and I met 3 years ago at a friend's retirement party. He was charming, attentive, chivalrous in a way that felt almost anachronistic, opening doors, pulling out chairs, insisting on walking curbside on the sidewalk. I told him on our second date that I was child-free, not on the fence, not waiting for the right person to change my mind. Done. Decided. Permanent. He nodded, like I'd told him my favorite color. I already raised mine, he said. I'm not looking for a do-over. I married him 11 months later. Leah was 22 then, living with her boyfriend across town. She was polite to me in the way people are polite to hotel staff, pleasant enough, zero emotional investment. I didn't push it. I wasn't trying to be her mother. She had one, a woman named Claire who died when Leah was 16 and whose ghost occupied every family photo on every wall in Sam's house. I respected that grief. I didn't rearrange the photos. I didn't redecorate. I moved into Sam's home because it made financial sense. His mortgage was nearly paid off, my apartment lease was ending, and I kept my own savings, my own retirement accounts, my own career as a project manager at a logistics firm. My name never went on the deed. Sam said we'd get around to it. We never got around to it. I should have heard the ticking then. I didn't. 8 months ago, Leah showed up at our door on a Tuesday night, mascara streaked to her jawline, a duffel bag in one hand, and a positive pregnancy test in the other. Her boyfriend, whose name I will not dignify by remembering, had responded to the news of impending fatherhood by moving to another state. Literally. Packed while she was at work and left a note on the kitchen counter like a coward leaving a restaurant review. Sam pulled her inside, held her, and looked at me over her shoulder with an expression I'd never seen before. Not a request, a declaration. She's staying. Of course, I said, because I'm not a monster. She needed her father. She needed stability. I understood that. The first 2 months were fine. Leah was quiet, kept to herself, worked her job at a marketing agency, and attended her prenatal appointments. I drove her to 2 of them when Sam couldn't. I bought prenatal vitamins without being asked. I was trying. I want that on the record, I was trying. Then the conversation started. It was Sam, first casual over dinner. Leah's been thinking about what happens after the baby comes. Childcare is so expensive these days. I agreed. Childcare is expensive. I suggested she look into the subsidized daycare program her employer partnered with. Sam's fork paused midair. She's not comfortable with strangers watching her baby. I suggested a nanny. Someone vetted someone with references. She doesn't want a stranger in the house. I suggested Leah reduce her hours worked part-time, maybe remote. She just got promoted. She can't step back now. Every door I opened, he closed. And each time he closed one, the room got smaller. Then came the real ask. Not from Sam, from Leah, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around a mug of decaf belly round at 7 months' eyes, that same devastating shade of Claire's from the photos on the wall. Would you be willing to watch the baby during the day, just while I'm at work? My throat tightened. Leah, I work full-time. I know. But you could go remote, or maybe take a break. Dad said you've talked about slowing down. I had never said that. Not once. I looked at Sam, who was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, and his eyes slid away from mine like oil off glass. I haven't talked about slowing down, I said carefully. It would just be temporary, Sam said. How temporary? Silence. I asked about child support. Leah's jaw hardened. I'm not dragging him through court. He'll come back. He just needs time. She was still in love with him. The man who left via post-it note. She was designing her entire childcare plan around the fantasy of his return, and I was supposed to sacrifice my career to hold the scaffolding in place while she waited. I laid it out plainly. If I quit my job, I lose my income, my 401k contributions, my professional momentum. I asked Sam directly, would he match my retirement contributions? Would he add me to the deed? Would he put anything in writing that protected me financially? He stared at me like I'd asked him to notarize a love letter. You're my wife, he said. Why are you talking like a lawyer? Because I'm living in your house, Sam. Not ours. Yours. That landed. I watched it land. And I watched him choose not to pick it up. The next week, he refinanced the house to build out the basement into a nursery for Leah. He didn't tell me until the contractor showed up. That was Wednesday. By Friday, Leah was standing in my doorway with tears rolling down her face, and she said the thing I will never unhear. I just wish my mom was alive. I stood there in that doorway and let Leah's words wash over me like ice water. Asterisk. I just wish my mom was alive. Asterisk. She wasn't wrong. She probably did wish that. Claire would have dropped everything. Claire would have built her life around that grandbaby without a second thought, and she would have done it with joy, because that's what mothers do. When the math works out, when the house is theirs, when the family is theirs, when the sacrifice lands somewhere it can grow roots. But I am not Claire. I have never been Claire. And the fact that Leah said it to my face in my doorway, with tears calibrated to a frequency only guilt responds to, that wasn't grief. That was a weapon. I didn't respond. I closed the door softly, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall, where Claire's wedding portrait still hung. Sam had never asked me if I wanted it there. I had never asked him to take it down. We had both been so careful, so accommodating, so polite, and politeness I was learning is just silence wearing a nice dress. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Sam and listened to him breathe and ran the numbers in my head like the project manager I am. If I quit, no income, no 401k match, no employer health insurance, my name on nothing. No deed, no legal protection, no written agreement. I'd be a 38-year-old woman with a gap on her resume, living in a house she doesn't own, raising a child she didn't choose for a stepdaughter who sees her as furniture with a pulse. And when the baby grows up, when Leah meets someone new or her ex crawls back with apologies and a ring, I'd be the woman who gave up everything and got a thank you card. Maybe. I got up at 5 a.m. Saturday morning. Sam was already in the kitchen, coffee made, sitting at the table with his reading glasses on and his laptop open, looking at nursery furniture. The basement renovation wasn't even finished, and he was already picking out cribs. We need to talk, I said. He closed the laptop, took off his glasses, folded his hands. The posture of a man preparing to manage a situation, not participate in one. I'm not quitting my job, Sam. Nobody's asking you to quit. Leah asked me to quit. You told her I'd talked about slowing down. I never said that. His jaw shifted. I said, you'd mention times it. I didn't. You said once that you were tired of the commute. Being tired of a commute is not the same as volunteering for full-time infant care. You know that. You times no times that. He exhaled through his nose, long and controlled. She's my daughter. She's scared. She's alone. I'm asking you as my wife to help my family. I am your family. Then act like it. The words hung between us like a blade. I felt something shift in my chest, not break, not yet, but times detach, asterisk. Like a cable pulling free from an anchor. If I do this, I said slowly, I need my name on the house. I need a postnuptial agreement. I need you to contribute to my retirement for every year I'm not working. In writing, notarized. Jesus Christ. You sound like a what? A lawyer. Good. Because you just refinanced this house without telling me, Sam. You made a 30-year financial decision about a property I live in but don't own, and you didn't even mention it until a stranger showed up with a sledgehammer. He stood up. I did that for my daughter. And what have you done for me? Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the basement, the contractor's plastic sheeting rustled like something breathing. I married you, he said. I almost laughed. I think I did laugh, actually. A short, airless sound that tasted like rust. You married me and put me in a house with your dead wife's photos on every wall, no equity, no legal standing, and now you want me to quit my career to babysit your grandchild while your 25-year-old daughter refuses daycare, refuses a nanny, refuses child support, refuses to adjust her schedule, and refuses to accept that her ex left her. Every single solution exists, Sam. She just won't take any of them because each one means admitting he's gone. And you're enabling it because you can't stand to see her cry. Get out. It wasn't Sam. It was Leah standing at the top of the basement stairs in a bathrobe, one hand on her belly, face blotched and furious. You don't get to talk about my life like that. You're not my mother. You're not even. She stopped herself, but we all heard the ghost of the sentence. Asterisk. You're not even family. Asterisk. I looked at Sam. He looked at the floor. That was my answer. That was every answer I was ever going to get. I packed in 40 minutes. Everything I owned fit in my car and 2 suitcases, which tells you something about how little space I'd been allowed to occupy in 3 years of marriage. I called my friend from the driveway. She picked up on the second ring, heard 3 sentences, and said, "Come now. Guest room's ready." Sam followed me to the car. "You're being dramatic. We can figure this out. You refinanced a house I don't own to build a nursery for a grandchild you expect me to raise for free. There's nothing to figure out. She's my time's daughter, asterisk, and I was supposed to be your wife." I pulled out of the driveway at 11:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at the dashboard clock and thought, times. This is the minute my marriage ended times, and I wanted to remember it. By 2 p.m., both of them were blowing up my phone. Sam's text oscillated between guilt and fury. "Times you're abandoning us. This is what family does. You knew I had a daughter when you married me." Asterisks. Leah's were shorter, sharper times. Selfish. So, selfish. Asterisk. The projection was almost artistic. A man who wouldn't protect his wife's retirement, calling her selfish. A woman who won't pursue child support, won't accept daycare, won't hire a nanny, won't reduce her hours, won't acknowledge her ex is gone, calling times me times selfish. For having one boundary, the one I stated on our second date. Monday morning, I called a divorce attorney. She listened to the whole story, paused, and said, "You don't own anything jointly." I said no. She said, "That actually simplifies things." I told her to go ham. And here's the part I keep turning over the beauty. The terrible, clarifying beauty is that without me in that house, absorbing the pressure, Sam and Leah will eventually turn on each other. He can't be the full-time grandparent and keep his job. She can't maintain her career and her fantasy simultaneously. The scaffolding I was supposed to be. It was never going to hold. It was just going to collapse later instead of sooner, and I would have been underneath it. I'm staying at my friend's place. My job is intact. My savings are intact. My name is on nothing of his, which means he gets nothing of mine. I keep thinking about what Sam said on our second date. Asterisk, I already raised mine. I'm not looking for a do-over. Asterisk, he was right. He wasn't looking for a do-over. He was looking for a backup plan. I just didn't know I was it.
Story 6. My husband Mark thinks I cheated on him. He's probably telling his friends and family that I had an affair, and that's why he's filing for divorce. It's a simple, clean story, and it makes him the good guy. The truth is, our marriage was a corpse long before I ever sent a text message to another man. I was just the one who finally got tired of pretending to be in mourning. For the last 10 years, we've been roommates. Not even good roommates, just two people who split the bills and shared a mortgage. We didn't talk, not really. Our conversations were about logistics. Who's picking up the kids? Did you remember to take the trash out? The roof is going to need replacing in a few years. I felt like another item on his household checklist. Fix the gutters, pay the property taxes, make sure the wife is functioning. He's a good man in the way people describe a reliable car. He starts every morning, he doesn't break down, he gets you from A to B, but there's no joy in it. He never looked at me like he actually times wanted times me. He just looked at me like he was used to me being there. The silence was the worst part. We could sit in the same room for hours and not say a word. I'd try, I really would. I'd ask about his day and he'd say, fine. I'd try to tell him a funny story and he'd give me a tight little smile while staring at the TV. It was like shouting into a void. After a while, you just stop shouting. You start to believe you don't have a voice. We went to counseling once a few years ago. It was my idea, of course. For him, it was just another problem to solve. He sat there, answered the therapist's questions like he was on a job interview, and waited for her to give him a list of instructions to fix me. He never understood that it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about feeling something. We stopped going after a few sessions. It was a waste of money, he said. I was so lonely I thought it was going to physically kill me. You can't understand that kind of loneliness unless you've lived it, sleeping next to someone every night and feeling like you're on a different planet. Then I met Jack at my new job. It wasn't some grand romance. It was just easy. We were working on a project together and he made a stupid joke. I laughed a real laugh and it felt like a muscle I hadn't used in years. We started talking more at work and then it turned into texting. It was nothing serious. We'd send memes, complain about our boss, talk about what we were watching on TV. He was just a friend. But he was a friend who listened. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. When I said something I thought was clever, he'd text back LOL or tell me I was funny. It was a tiny little spark of light in the gray, suffocating fog of my home life. Was it flirty sometimes? I guess in a harmless way. It was fun. It was a reminder that I was still a person. I wasn't just a mom, a wife, a household manager. I was someone who could be interesting and witty. I was alive. Of course, Mark found out. And he didn't find out because I told him, which I should have. He found out because he waited until I was asleep and went through my phone. He didn't come to me and say, hey, I'm feeling insecure or I'm worried about us. He went behind my back like a spy, looking for evidence to prove his worst fears. The confrontation was awful. He didn't ask me why. He didn't ask if I was unhappy. He just held up the phone like a prosecutor revealing the murder weapon. He accused me of sleeping with Jack, of planning to leave him. His paranoia was suffocating. So I did something stupid. I panicked. He was watching my phone like a hawk, and every notification from Jack Harkness sent him into a rage. I changed Jack's name in my contacts to a woman's name. I just wanted to stop the constant third degree. I also deleted some of our conversations. Not because there was anything incriminating in them, but because I knew Mark would twist every single word. There was one text Jack sent on Thanksgiving when I was stressing about the turkey. I sent him a picture of my messy kitchen, and he wrote back, "That level of turkey prep is so hot." Jack's a goofy guy. He says weird stuff like that. To Mark, it was a confession of a passionate affair. I was just trying to protect a simple friendship from my husband's insane jealousy. I was trying to keep that one small, happy part of my life for myself. That was the real start of the war. My phone became the battlefield. He demanded I give him the passcode and allow him unrestricted access to everything: my texts, my emails, my social media. He wanted to read every word I typed to anyone. He said it was the only way he could ever trust me again. But it wasn't about trust. It was about control. It was about him punishing me for finding a moment of happiness outside of him. I refused. That phone, that little bit of privacy, was the only thing I had left that was mine. It wasn't about Jack anymore. It was about me refusing to be treated like a prisoner in my own life. I told him no. I told him he needed to get help for his paranoia and his insecurity, and that my privacy wasn't the price for his peace of mind. The fights got worse. He'd follow me from room to room, demanding the phone, his voice getting louder and colder. Last night was the worst it's ever been. I told him for what felt like the 100th time that he was not going to get my passcode. I was done being interrogated. "This isn't about the phone, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about you never seeing me, and I'm not going to let you control me now." He just stopped. He wasn't yelling anymore. All the rage drained from his face and was replaced by something else, something terrifyingly calm. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years. And all I saw was ice. "You're right," he said, his voice flat. "It isn't about the phone." He picked up his own phone from the counter. "There are other ways to find out what's going on." I watched him as he tapped on his screen, his thumb moving with a purpose I hadn't seen in him for years. My stomach twisted. He wasn't searching for information. He was searching for a person. It took me a second to realize what he was doing. He was on social media looking for Jack. Not Jack, but Jack's wife. He was going to find her. He was going to blow everything up. "Mark, don't," I whispered, a real primal fear cutting through my anger. "Please. You have no idea what you're doing." He didn't look up from his phone. "I know exactly what I'm doing." "You wanted to hide things. Fine. Let's bring it all into the light." He found her profile. I saw a picture of her and Jack with their 2 kids at a pumpkin patch. A happy family. A normal family. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't about us anymore. He was pulling innocent people into his war. "She has nothing to do with this," I pleaded, taking a step towards him. "This is between you and me." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were completely empty. "You made it about them when you started texting her husband behind my back." He tapped out a message, his face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't know what he wrote, but I could imagine. Something cold and factual, designed for maximum damage. Asterisk. Your husband has been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife. You should check his phone. Asterisk. He hit send, then set his phone down on the counter with a quiet final click. He had just dropped a bomb, and now he was waiting for it to go off. It didn't take long, maybe 15 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was Jack. I answered, my hand shaking. "What the hell did you do?" he whispered, his voice frantic. "My wife is losing her mind. She just got a message from your husband. He sent her screenshots." "Screenshots, you idiot. Why didn't you delete everything?" The blood drained from my face. Screenshots. Mark hadn't just found the text. He had documented them. The goofy joke about the turkey, the late-night complaints about work. He'd saved them like ammunition. He'd been preparing for this. "I'm so sorry, Jack," I stammered. "I had no idea he would. My life is blowing up right now because of you," he cut me off, his voice cracking. "I can't talk to you. Ever again. Lose my number." He hung up. And just like that, it was over. The one small friendship, the one little escape was gone. Erased. I stood in the kitchen, the silence rushing back in heavier and more menacing than ever before. Mark was watching me, his expression unreadable. "There," he said, as if he'd just finished a chore. "Now we know." "Know what, Mark?" I snapped, the shock finally giving way to a white-hot fury. "What do we know?" "That you're cruel enough to ruin someone's life just to prove a point. That you're a coward who attacks other people because you can't handle your own feelings." He didn't even flinch. I did what I had to do. "You refused to be honest with me." It was his new mantra. He wasn't a paranoid, controlling husband. He was a rational man forced into a corner. He had calmly and logically detonated our lives, and now he was standing back pretending to be a victim of the blast. The next few days were a special kind of hell. We lived in the same house but didn't speak. The air was thick with hate. I felt like I was suffocating. I went to work and pretended everything was fine, terrified that at any moment HR would call me into an office. I imagined the whispers. Jack and I worked in the same department. Mark hadn't just destroyed a friendship. He'd jeopardized my career. All to win a fight I didn't even know we were having. A week later, I came home to an envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it. It wasn't sealed. Inside were divorce papers. He hadn't even had the decency to hand them to me to look me in the eye. It was just another piece of administrative work left for me to handle. Underneath the papers was a sticky note in his neat block handwriting. Asterisk. I've moved some things to the guest room. I'll be staying there until we sort this out. I think it's for the best. Asterisk. For the best. After 17 years of marriage, this is how it ended. With a stack of legal documents and a note like he was reminding me to pick up milk. He's telling people I'm showing my true colors now. He's right about that. He is finally seeing them. He's seen the color of rage from a woman who screamed for his attention for a decade only to be met with silence. He's seeing the pain of a wife who was treated like a faulty appliance that needed to be managed, not a person who needed to be loved. and he's seeing the fury of a human being whose entire world he methodically set on fire just to prove he was right all along. He tells his story, and it's neat and tidy. The wife had an emotional affair, she lied and hid it, and the heartbroken husband had no choice but to end the marriage. But his story leaves out the years of crushing loneliness. It leaves out the suffocating quiet of a home where no one ever really talked. It leaves out a man who could diagnose a problem with the roof from a single water stain, but couldn't see that his own wife was drowning right in front of him. He thinks this was all about Jack. He honestly believes that if he had just gotten into my phone and read all my messages, he could have fixed the problem. He could have eliminated the threat, and things would have gone back to normal. He never understood. It was never about Jack. It was about the silence he left, the void he created. Jack didn't break our marriage. He just happened to be the person who showed me what it felt like to not be alone. And for that, Mark could never forgive me. It was always about him. It was always about him.
Story 7.
My husband probably told you his story. The one where he's the hero, the wronged man who came home to find his wife with someone else. I'm sure he painted me as a monster, a snake, and maybe I am. But you only heard what he wanted you to hear. You heard about the fire and the fight. You didn't hear about the silence. For years, all I heard was silence. Let me tell you about my birthday this year. It started like every other day for the past decade. I woke up alone. My husband, let's call him David, was already gone for work. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from him. 3 letters, happy birthday. Not happy birthday, honey. Not an emoji. Just the kind of text you send to a coworker you barely know. That was it. That was the celebration. He hadn't mentioned it the night before, and I knew he wouldn't mention it when he got home. There wouldn't be a card or a badly wrapped gift or even a suggestion to go out for dinner. For a long time now, I've felt more like a household appliance than a person. I'm the Roomba that keeps the floors clean, the dishwasher that makes sure there are plates, the slow cooker that has a hot meal ready at 6 p.m. sharp. I manage the bills, I schedule the parent-teacher conferences for our daughter, I remember his mother's birthday and buy the gift. I keep the entire machine of our lives running smoothly, and I do it so well that I've become completely invisible. David comes home, sees a clean house and a fed child, and assumes it all just happens. He stopped seeing the person doing it all a very, very long time ago. He stopped seeing times me asterisk. It's a slow death, that kind of invisibility. You start to wonder if you're even real. You talk and nobody seems to hear you. You try to start a conversation about your day and he just grunts while scrolling through his phone. You put on a new dress and he doesn't notice. You cry quietly in the bathroom so you don't disturb him. You become a ghost in your own home. Then I met someone. We'll call him Alex. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I went looking for. He's the dad of one of my daughter's friends. We started talking at school pickups. Just small talk at first. But then he started asking me questions. About my day, about my interest. He remembered that I liked gardening and asked me about my tomato plants a week later. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a miracle. Someone was actually listening. Our chats turned into texts. He sent me funny articles he thought I'd like. He sent me paragraphs, not acronyms. He told me I was witty. He told me I was smart. When I made a joke, he actually laughed. He made me feel like the person I used to be before I got lost in my marriage. He saw me. Was it wrong, God? Of course it was. I knew it was. I felt guilty every single second. But it was also like taking a deep breath after being held underwater for years. It was a spark. It was a reminder that I was still in here, that the woman who liked to laugh and talk about books and feel beautiful hadn't completely disappeared. On my birthday, after I got that happy birthday text, something in me just broke. I was sitting in a silent house, a house I kept perfect for a man who wouldn't even type out the full words, "Happy birthday" for me. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. It was Alex. It was a long message telling me he hoped I had a wonderful day, that I deserved to be celebrated. And he mentioned a funny story I'd told him last week. He remembered. A relative stranger remembered more about me than my own husband. I made a decision. A reckless, stupid, selfish decision. I told him David was working late and asked if he wanted to come over for a drink to celebrate my pathetic birthday, I joked. It was supposed to be a small act of rebellion. One afternoon where I felt like a person, not a function. It wasn't about sex, not really. It was about connection. It was about having someone look me in the eye and make me feel like I mattered on a day I felt completely and utterly forgotten. He came over. We talked. We laughed so much. He brought a stupid little cupcake with a single candle on it. It was more effort than David had put into my birthday in 5 years. One thing led to another. The connection I was so desperate for became physical. We ended up in my bedroom, and his clothes ended up on the floor mixed with mine. It was careless and fast, and for a few minutes I didn't think about my grocery list, or the dry cleaning, or the silence. We were in the shower together, washing away the guilt, laughing about something ridiculous. The water was hot, the steam was thick, and for the first time in forever I felt happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. It was a bubble of joy, and I knew it was temporary, but I was so grateful for it. That's when I heard it. A sound from downstairs that didn't belong. The distinct sound of a key turning in the front door lock. My blood went cold. It was too early. David wasn't supposed to be home for hours. He's early, the thought screamed in my head. He came home to surprise me. The irony was so cruel, it almost made me laugh. The one day he decides to do something special is the one day I've ruined everything. The bubble didn't just pop. It exploded, and all that was left was ice-cold terror. I grabbed a towel, my heart hammering against my ribs. Alex wrapped one around his waist, his face a mask of confusion and panic. I stepped out of the bathroom first, trying to form a lie, any lie that could possibly explain this. But the words died in my throat the moment I saw him. David was standing in our living room. He wasn't crying, he wasn't yelling. That would have been better. Instead, he just looked at me. His eyes were completely flat, like slate. There was nothing behind them. No hurt, no sadness, just a terrifying emptiness. He looked right through me as if I was already gone and said, "Happy birthday." The words were so quiet, so devoid of any emotion, that they chilled me more than any scream ever could. That's when I smelled it. Acrid smoke like a barbecue gone wrong. It was coming from the open front door. I looked past David's shoulder and saw it. There was a fire in our driveway. Not just a little fire, but a bonfire. For a second, my brain just refused to understand what I was seeing. Then I recognized the shape of a shirt, the dark leather of a wallet curling in the flames. He had taken Alex's clothes, his phone, his keys, and he had set them on fire. This wasn't a man heartbroken by betrayal. This was something else entirely. This was calculated. This was a performance. This was a man who solves problems by setting fires. My shock curdled into pure, undiluted terror. Who was this person I had shared a bed with for 15 years? Alex came out of the bedroom behind me, completely lost. "What's going on?" he whispered. David didn't even look at me. He kept his eyes on Alex. "Your clothes are in the driveway," he said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "You should probably go get them." The look on Alex's face was absolute horror. He was trapped. Naked but for one of my husband's towels. My husband, who was now dangling Alex's car keys from his finger, holding them like a trophy he'd just won. In that moment, I wasn't trying to protect my lover. I was trying to de-escalate what felt like a hostage situation. I was trying to stop the terrifyingly calm man in my living room from doing something much, much worse. "David, please," I begged. "Just let him go. This is my fault." He finally looked at me, a flicker of something ugly in his eyes. "Oh, I know. I'll get him some sweats," I said, moving toward our bedroom. "Just some pants so he can leave." "Please. I just wanted to get Alex out of there safely to end this nightmare." But David moved, blocking my path to the bedroom. He was enjoying this. He was savoring the power he had over us. "What about protecting me?" he asked, a sneer twisting his face. "In my own house, what about that?" I was speechless. He was the one who had set a fire on our property. He was the one standing there like a predator, enjoying the fear he was causing. How could he possibly see himself as the victim? Alex, seeing that I was getting nowhere, took a step forward. He just wanted to leave. "Look, man," he started, "just give me a pair of pants. I'll walk home. I'll do whatever you want." He took one step too close. It happened so fast. David didn't just push him. He dropped the keys and swung. The sound of his fist hitting Alex's face was sickeningly wet and loud. Alex stumbled back, clutching his eye, the towel almost falling off him. A man who was half naked, unarmed, and just trying to cover himself. A man who posed zero threat. And my husband hit him. Hard. I saw it then. The violence he was capable of simmering just under that quiet surface I'd mistaken for calm strength for all these years. This wasn't the righteous anger of a betrayed husband. This was a monster. "Get out," David spat, his voice finally breaking with rage. He pointed at Alex. "And you," he said, turning to me, his face twisted with a hatred I'd never seen before. "You get out too." He shoved Alex toward the door, and then he shoved me. I stumbled out onto the front porch, the rough concrete scraping my bare feet. He threw Alex's keys onto the grass and slammed the door. The lock clicked shut. And there we were. Me and Alex standing on our front lawn in nothing but towels. The neighbors' curtains were twitching. A bonfire of clothes, lighter fluid, and dignity was smoldering in my driveway. Alex's eye was already starting to swell and turn a dark, ugly purple. He had a black eye. He had no phone, no wallet, and his car was locked. The shame was so immense I thought it would swallow me whole. But underneath it was something else, a cold, hard clarity. The affair was my mistake. It was a selfish, messy, horrible mistake born out of loneliness. But this was him. The man who would set a fire. The man who would punch an unarmed person. The man who would throw his wife out of her home half naked on her birthday. He thinks he's the hero of this story. The man who took a stand. He probably tells people he kicked a cheater out of his house. He doesn't tell them he revealed himself as a violent, controlling monster. He thinks the story is about what I did in our bed. He doesn't understand that the real story is about what he did in our driveway. He didn't just burn some clothes. He burned down any illusion I had left of the man I married. He validated every single fear I ever had about being trapped with him. I'm not sorry for wanting to feel alive. I am sorry for the pain I caused. But I am not sorry that I'm not in that house anymore. Because I wasn't just kicked out. I was set free. I just had to see the monster first to realize I was in a cage all along.
Story 8.
I'm the girl who cheated. I know that's how he tells the story, and he's not wrong. It's the one fact that burns everything else to the ground. But it's not the whole story. It's just the ending he saw. The story I lived was something different. Before I met him, my life was like one of those perfect houses in a magazine. Everything was expensive, clean, and completely empty. There was no life in it. The people, the men I dated, they were all the same. They looked at me and saw my father's last name, the balance in my trust fund. They'd talk about mergers and acquisitions over dinner while I just pushed food around my plate, feeling invisible. My whole world was about appearances. Silent dinners where the clinking of silverware was the loudest sound. Grand gestures that meant nothing because they were just transactions. Love was something you bought, you proved you won. Then I met him. He worked at a small graphic design company my dad's firm hired for a tiny, unimportant project. He was wearing a faded band t-shirt and had paint under his fingernails. He didn't look at my purse to see if it was designer. He looked at my face when I talked. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He asked me about my dreams, not my portfolio. For the first time, someone actually saw times me, times Vanessa, not the walking bank account. Our worlds should have never mixed. His life was loud and messy and real. He had roommates and late rent payments and friends who would drop everything to help you move a couch. My life was scheduled, sterile, and lonely. When I introduced him to my parents, my father shook his hand and then immediately asked him about his 5-year plan. He just smiled and said, "To be happy." My father didn't get it. I did. It was everything I ever wanted. For 5 years, we built a life together. We moved into a small apartment that he filled with warmth and laughter. Our friends merged his rowdy, loyal group and my polished, polite ones. It felt like a miracle. I was living in this beautiful dream, a normal life. And it terrified me every single day. I felt like an imposter, a spoiled girl playing dress-up. I kept waiting for him to wake up and realize I wasn't good enough. That I was just pretending to be this down-to-earth person when deep down I was one of them, one of the hollow people I ran away from. The better things got, the louder the voice in my head became. He'd look at me with so much love, so much trust, and the voice would whisper times, "You're going to break it. You don't deserve this. You're going to ruin him." Asterisk. Loving him felt like a 5-year-long panic attack. I was so afraid of losing the one real thing in my life that my fears started to poison it. I'd pick fights over nothing just to see if he'd leave. He never did. He was patient and kind, which only made me feel worse. It made me feel like an even bigger fraud. The night it happened is a sick blur. I was out with some of my old friends from college. They were all talking about their lives, which sounded like checklists. Engagement, wedding house, in the suburbs, kids. It was the exact life I'd run from, but they made it sound so certain, so secure. All I could think about was the gnawing uncertainty inside me. All I could hear was that voice screaming, "Times, he's going to leave you. You're not what he thinks you are. It's only a matter of time." Asterisks. I drank too much champagne, trying to make the voice shut up. It didn't work. It just made me feel more disconnected, like I was watching my life from outside my own body. A guy started talking to me at the bar. He was a carbon copy of every man I'd ever dated before. Slick hair, expensive watch, an easy, meaningless smile. He said all the empty things I was used to hearing. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't a temptation. It was familiar. It felt like slipping back into the role I knew how to play. The conversation meant nothing. He meant nothing. He was a ghost. But for a few minutes, talking to him felt like an escape from the crushing fear that I was about to lose everything I truly loved. It was a stupid, pathetic, and desperate act of self-destruction. It was me pressing the red button just to prove it was real. I was so convinced I was going to fail, so sure I was going to hurt him, that I did it myself first. It was the ultimate act of cowardice. I murdered my own happiness before anything else could. I woke up the next morning with a pit in my stomach so deep I thought I might actually be sick. The shame was a physical weight. He was in the kitchen making coffee, humming a song he liked. He smiled at me, and I felt like a monster. I swore to myself I would bury it. I would delete the memory, lock it away, and spend the rest of my life making it up to him being the person he deserved. It was a disgusting, selfish plan, but it was the only one I had. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. My heart stopped. It was a text from the guy from the bar. Something stupid. "Last night was fun. We should do it again." My blood ran cold. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was evidence. It was proof of the crime I had committed against the only person I had ever truly loved. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I had to delete it. I had to erase it before it could ruin everything. I just had to hit delete, and this nightmare would be over. I fumbled with the phone, my thumb hovering over the trash icon. Just as I was about to press it, he walked into the bedroom holding a mug of coffee for me. He saw the look on my face. The pure, unfiltered panic. "You okay?" he asked, his smile fading. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my ears. He put the mug down and walked toward me, his brow furrowed with concern. He glanced down at my hands, at the phone gripped so tight my knuckles were white. Before I could hide it, before I could do anything, he gently took it from me. He didn't read it right away. For a second, he just held the phone, looking from it to me, his face full of confusion. He trusted me. The idea that there could be something bad on there probably didn't even cross his mind. He was just trying to figure out why I looked so terrified. Then his eyes dropped to the screen. I watched his face as he read the words. It was like watching a statue crack. First, nothing. He just went completely vacant, his expression wiped clean. All the warmth, all the love I was used to seeing there just vanished. The air in the room got cold and thin. He put the phone down on the nightstand, very gently, like it was a bomb. He didn't look at me. He just turned and walked out of the bedroom. That silence was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was 1,000 times worse than screaming. I followed him into the living room, a pathetic weight escaping my lips. He was just standing by the window, looking out at the street, his back to me. "Who is he?" he asked. His voice was flat. "Dead." It meant nothing. I choked out the words, feeling like poison. It was a mistake. One stupid mistake. He finally turned around, and the look on his face broke me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something much deeper. It was a kind of disbelief, like I had just told him the sky was green. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "A mistake," he repeated, his voice quiet. "You made a choice, Vanessa. This was a choice." And then the yelling started. It wasn't just him, it was me. I was sobbing, begging, trying to explain the mess in my head, the fear, the self-sabotage, the voice that told me I was going to ruin everything. But it all just sounded like excuses. Pathetic, selfish excuses. He wasn't hearing my reasons. He was just hearing the truth. I had shattered his trust. I had taken the one pure good thing in my life and destroyed it for no reason at all. Our fight wasn't a performance for the neighbors, though I'm sure they heard every word. It was the sound of my soul literally tearing itself in two. The good part that loved him and the broken part that had just killed him. He said it was over. He said he couldn't even look at me. Then he walked back into the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. I collapsed on the floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The next day I went to my parents' house, just desperate for somewhere to go. When I came back to the apartment that evening, it was half empty. His clothes were gone. His books were gone. The stupid, ugly painting he loved was gone from the wall. He had taken his entire life out of ours while I wasn't there. He had erased himself. That's when I made my choice. He chose to leave, and I chose to fight. In the world I grew up in, you don't just let things go, you fix them. You prove your worth. If something is broken, you throw money and effort at it until it's whole again. I thought his silence was a test. He was hurting, and he needed to see how much I loved him. He needed proof. So I started sending the gifts. First it was flowers to his office. A huge bouquet with a card that just said, "I'm sorry. I love you." Then I sent a first edition copy of his favorite book to his new place. I had to get the address from one of his friends. I wrote letters, pages and pages of them, pouring out everything I couldn't say during our fight. I explained the fear, my feelings of not being good enough, how my love for him was so big it scared me into doing the dumbest thing in the world. He never responded. The silence continued. So I tried harder. I thought he needs to see times me. He needs to know I won't just disappear, that I won't give up. I knew his routine. I knew which coffee shop he went to in the morning, which bar he and his friends went to on Fridays. I'd go with my friends and we'd just happen to be there. I'd try to catch his eye just to give him a small, sad smile to show him I was still here, still fighting for us. He would just turn and walk away. I wasn't stalking him. In my messed up head, I was making a grand gesture. I was trying to scream, "I love you," across the canyon of silence he had built between us. I asked my friends to talk to him, to tell him how devastated I was, to tell him that he was my whole world. They did, but it only made things worse. He told them to tell me to stop. But I couldn't. Giving up felt like admitting that he was right, that I didn't love him enough. Persistence was how I had been taught to show devotion. You don't take no for an answer. You wear them down with the sheer force of your love. I see now how crazy that sounds, but at the time it was the only logic I understood. I thought his anger was a wall I just had to be strong enough to break down. The final blow didn't come from him. It came from my mother. She called me one afternoon. Her tone was serious, the same one she used when a business deal went south. "Vanessa," she said, no warmth in her voice. "I spoke with his mother. You need to stop." My blood ran cold. "What? Why?" "You're hurting him," she said, and the words hit me like a physical slap. "This isn't helping. You're scaring him. All these things you're doing. The letters, the showing up. It's not love. It's harassment. You have to leave him alone. It's over." Hearing it from her, the woman who taught me that the solution to any problem was to be relentless, to take what you want, to never show weakness, it broke through all my delusions. She was the one who always told me to fight, and now she was telling me to surrender. I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence. And for the first time I saw myself through his eyes. The gifts weren't romantic. They were intrusions. The letters weren't apologies. They were demands for attention. My presence wasn't a reminder of my love. It was a threat. My grand gestures weren't a testament to my devotion. They were deeply, profoundly selfish. I wasn't the heartbroken girl fighting for the love of her life. I was the monster under his bed. I was the villain in his story. I finally understood. The silence he wanted wasn't a test for me to pass. It was his new reality. A reality he needed to build to protect himself from me. And I wasn't in it. I was never going to be in it again.
Story 9.
I know I look like the bad guy here. I get it. My boyfriend finally starts getting better after years of being horribly sick. And what do? I ask for an open relationship. It sounds like the most selfish, cruel thing a person could do, and I've seen the look in his eyes every day for the past month that tells me he thinks so too. But there's so much more to it than that. When I met Mark, he was incredible. He was funny, smart, and so ridiculously confident. I was 23, insecure, and felt like I was just faking my way through adulthood. He saw something in me, and for that I would have done anything for him. I put him on a pedestal. A few months into our relationship, we were lying in bed, and he casually said, "What would you think about an open relationship just for fun, like a little sexcapade?" My heart just dropped. To him, it was a fun idea. To me, it was a confirmation of my deepest fear that I wasn't enough for this amazing person. I said no, absolutely not, and he dropped it immediately and apologized. But I never forgot it. I buried it deep down, but it was always there, the feeling that I was replaceable. Then about a year later, he got sick. It wasn't a cold or something that gets better. It was a chronic, debilitating illness that came out of nowhere and stole the man I fell in love with. The confident, athletic guy was gone, replaced by someone in constant pain who couldn't work, couldn't exercise, and fell into a deep, dark depression. My life stopped. My entire world shrank to the size of our tiny one-bedroom apartment. For the next 6 years, my 20s, I was his caretaker. That was my identity. My job was just the thing I did between making sure he took his meds, getting him to doctor's appointments, and holding him when the pain or the hopelessness was too much. My friends would invite me out, but I'd always say no. How could I go have fun when he was miserable at home? Eventually they stopped asking. My life was Mark. My purpose was keeping him afloat. I did it because I loved him, and I would do it again. But in the process of saving him, I completely disappeared. I didn't have hobbies. I didn't have ambitions. I was just the sick guy's girlfriend. Then a few months ago, 2 things happened at once. First, I got a new job. It's in a high-pressure field, and it's incredibly demanding. For the first time, I was terrified, but in a good way. And then a weird thing happened. I was good at it. Really good. My boss praised my work. Clients asked for me by name. I was leading projects and making decisions. I was building this person I never knew existed, a confident woman who was smart and capable all on her own. I started earning respect, and more importantly, I started respecting myself. At the exact same time, Mark started getting better. It was slow at first, a good day here and there, then a good week. He started physical therapy. He started talking to his old friends again. The light came back into his eyes. He wanted to pick up where we left off to get his old life back. He started talking about getting married, about the future, about how we had finally made it through the storm. He wanted his old girlfriend back. The problem was, she wasn't there anymore. The thought of snapping back into that old role where my happiness was just a reflection of his felt suffocating. It felt like a cage. I was just starting to discover who I was, and I was terrified of losing her again. One day at work, a coworker was talking about her relationship troubles, and she mentioned she and her boyfriend were trying polyamory. She wasn't talking about it in a sleazy way. She was talking about communication and autonomy. And that word autonomy hit me like a ton of bricks. That's what I was craving. It wasn't about other men. I honestly have zero interest in dating. It was about having a life that was my own, separate from his. So I tried to talk to him. It was the most awkward, painful conversation of my life. I tried to explain that I felt like I'd lost myself for years, and that I needed space to figure out who I am now. I said I wasn't sure if I was in the right headspace for the kind of serious, all-in commitment he wanted now that he was better. I clumsily used the word polyamory as an example of people having relationships with more personal freedom, and I immediately knew it was a mistake. I even said maybe I needed to be single for a while. He just stared at me, completely blindsided. All he heard was, "Now that you're not a burden anymore, I want to go sleep with other people." It crushed him. He sees it as the ultimate betrayal. He thinks my new job has given me some big ego and I'm just on a power trip. He doesn't get that this is the first time in my adult life I've had any ego at all. Now we're living in a nightmare. We can't afford to move out, so we're trapped in this tiny apartment, suffocating in the tension. He keeps trying to fix it by offering compromises that totally miss the point. he suggested a threesome, as if that would solve anything. Then he said maybe I could be with other girls, but not guys. He's treating this like a sexual problem, an itch I need to scratch. He doesn't understand that this is a crisis about my entire identity. I look at him and I see the man I love, my best friend, and I see how much I'm hurting him. It makes me feel like a monster. But going back to the way things were feels like it would kill the person I'm just starting to become. Last night he came home with a huge smile on his face, the first real one I'd seen in weeks. He was holding 2 tickets. "I booked us a weekend away," he said, his voice full of hope. "A little cabin upstate. No phones, no work, just us. Like the old days. We can finally reconnect and fix this." I felt the blood drain from my face. I nodded and forced a smile, telling him it sounded wonderful. He hugged me, holding me tight, and whispered, "I'm not going to lose you." He thinks this trip is going to be a new beginning for us. And all I can think is that it's going to be the end. The drive upstate was the quietest 3 hours of my life. Mark had made a playlist of all our old songs, the ones from when we first started dating, and he kept glancing over at me, smiling, trying to catch my eye. I just stared out the window at the passing trees, my stomach in knots. He was trying so hard to recreate a past that I was desperately trying to escape. Every song felt like another bar on the cage he was unknowingly building around me. The cabin was beautiful, exactly the kind of rustic, cozy place we would have loved years ago. There was a fireplace, a big comfy bed, and a porch that overlooked a quiet lake. It was meant to be romantic, but to me it felt like a stage set for a final, terrible scene. That first night he made dinner. He was so proud, telling me how his physical therapy was paying off. How he finally had the stamina to stand and cook a full meal again. I watched him, this man I had nursed and supported for years, finally looking healthy and happy. And all I felt was a profound, soul-crushing guilt. He opened a bottle of wine and sat next to me on the couch in front of the fire. "See," he said softly, taking my hand. "This is all we need. Just us. We made it through hell, babe. We can make it through anything." And that was it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I pulled my hand away. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We need to talk. For real this time." His smile faded. I thought that's what we were doing. Reconnecting. "No," I said, tears starting to well up in my eyes. "You're trying to reconnect with someone who isn't here anymore. The girl you fell in love with. I don't think she exists." He looked so confused, so hurt. "What are you talking about? You're right here." I finally let it all out. The years of feeling invisible, of my entire world being defined by his sickness. I told him how my new job wasn't about ego, but about discovering a part of myself I never knew I had, a competent, strong part that had nothing to do with being his girlfriend. "This isn't about sex or polyamory or any of that," I pleaded, hoping he would finally hear me. "I don't want to date anyone else. I want to date times myself, asterisk. For 6 years there was no me. It was only us, and even then it was mostly about keeping you alive. I lost myself in that, Mark. And I'm terrified of losing myself again right when I'm starting to find her." He was quiet for a long time, just staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. "So that's it? I was a burden, a project, and now that I'm better, you're bored, you're ready to trade up?" "No, that's not it at all. Isn't it? He shot back, his voice rising. I get my life back and you immediately want out. You want autonomy. What the hell do you think I've wanted for the past 6 years while you were my caretaker? I was a prisoner in my own body. I know that. This isn't a competition of who had it worse. It feels like it is. It feels like you're punishing me for getting better. He stood up and started pacing. You know, I remember when we first met. You were so unsure of yourself. I saw how amazing you were, and I spent years telling you, trying to get you to see it. And now that you finally do, you use that confidence to tell me you don't want me anymore. It's a slap in the face. The thing I had buried for years came bubbling to the surface. You want to talk about the beginning, I said, my voice shaking with a new kind of anger. A few months in, you asked me if I wanted an open relationship. A sexcapade. You thought it would be fun. To me, it was you telling me I wasn't enough on my own. I spent our entire relationship feeling like I had to earn my spot, prove that I was enough. And then you got sick and my purpose became proving I was loyal enough. I'm done proving myself, Mark. I need to be enough for times me times now. He stared at me, dumbfounded. You're bringing that up now, a stupid comment I made when I was 28. You're using that as an excuse to destroy us. It's not an excuse, I was sobbing now. It's the foundation. The foundation was that you were the sun and I was just lucky to be in your orbit. I can't live like that anymore. I think we have to break up. The words hung in the air, awful and final. The rest of the weekend was a blur of silence and pain. We packed up the next morning and drove home without speaking a single word. Living together since then has been a special kind of hell. The one-bedroom apartment that once felt like our sanctuary, our bunker against the world, now feels like a prison cell we share. I move my stuff onto the couch. We communicate through text messages even when we're in the same room. I'm going to use the kitchen, or I need to take a shower. We are ghosts haunting the life we built together. I see him sometimes sitting on the edge of the bed we used to share, just staring at the wall. I can feel the weight of his sadness, and it makes me feel like the most monstrous person on the planet. Our two pets are the only bridge between us. He'll feed the cat, I'll walk the dog, and for a brief moment we'll have a civil exchange about their needs. It's a sad, pathetic imitation of the partnership we used to have. I'm saving every penny I can. I look at apartment listings late at night when I know he's asleep. The thought of leaving feels both liberating and terrifying. This man is still my best friend. He's the person who knows me better than anyone. But he fell in love with a version of me that was defined by him. And I've fallen in love with a version of myself that needs to be defined by me. His recovery was a miracle, but it was a miracle that pushed us apart. He needed to get his old life back, and I needed to build a new one. I saved his life, and in a way he saved mine by showing me I was worthy of love all those years ago. The tragedy is that we couldn't figure out how to save ourselves and stay together. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't go back into the shadow. Even if it means walking forward completely, utterly alone.
Story Teen.
I'm sure he's told you his side of the story. I'm the villain, the cheater who broke our family. And he's not wrong about the facts. I did cheat. I lied. But the facts are just bones, and he never tells you about the skin, about the why. He never tells you how I got there. My whole life has been about being afraid of being left, and in the end, he was the one who abandoned me, just in a much slower, quieter way than I ever expected. My parents died when I was a toddler. I don't remember them. I was given to my uncle, and he was fine, but I always knew I was a guest. I learned a lesson very early. You are not guaranteed a place in this world. Love can disappear. Safety can be taken away. That fear has followed me my whole life, this little ghost that sits on my shoulder whispering that I'm one wrong move away from being all alone again. When I met him, it felt like the ghost finally went quiet. He was my manager, older than me, so sure of himself. He seemed like the safest place on earth. He had a life, a daughter, a plan. He was an anchor, and I felt like I had been drifting in the ocean my entire life. I developed a huge crush. I'd go see him when he was bartending on the side, and every time I laughed at one of his jokes, it felt like I was trying on a new life, one where I belonged somewhere. One night, I just went for it. I kissed him. I felt like I had to do something big to make him see me, to choose me. And he did. He kissed me back, and it felt like I could finally breathe. A few weeks later, he told me I should quit my job so we could be together without it being a problem at work. To me, that was the ultimate proof. He was picking me. I didn't even think twice. I put in my notice the next day. I had my anchor. A few months later, the anchor showed me how easily it could be pulled up. We had a stupid fight, something about me staying out too late with my friends. It was nothing. But when I got home, all of my things, every shirt, every book, every picture, were packed into suitcases on the doorstep. He was standing in the doorway looking down at me like a judge. He told me that if I was going to be with him, I had to commit. I had to take care of him and his daughter. It wasn't a question. It was an ultimatum. All I could see was my entire childhood flashing in front of me. The feeling of being unwanted, of having nowhere to go. I didn't choose to walk back into that apartment. I was cornered. I walked back in because I was terrified of being alone again. I learned my lesson that night. His love came with rules, and my home depended on me following them perfectly. The first few years were rough. He had a temper and he drank too much. He got 2 DUIs. He cheated on me more than once. I found out, and each time it felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. I was the one who had to hold everything together. I finally told him that if he got in trouble with drinking again, I would leave. I wasn't trying to threaten him, I was just desperate. I had to save him because if his life fell apart, so did mine. To his credit, he stopped. He got sober and he stopped seeing other women. I was so proud of him. But he replaced the bottle with work, and he traded the other women for complete emotional distance from me. For years, he was a ghost. He left for work before I woke up and came home after I was asleep. He was building his business, and I supported him. But he wasn't my partner anymore. He was just a provider. He gave me a beautiful house, a nice car, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. But inside that beautiful house, I was so crushingly lonely. We barely talked. We had sex maybe a few times a year, and even then it felt like a chore he was checking off a list. I was starving for a connection, for someone to just see me, to ask me how my day was, to hold my hand. It wasn't even about sex. It was about feeling like I existed. I would cry in the shower so he wouldn't hear me, just asking myself, is this it? Is this my life? The loneliness started to feel like a disease. My friends were my only lifeline. And then one of them became something more. He's a friend we've both known for 20 years. It started so small. He just noticed I was sad. He'd ask if I was okay. He listened when I talked. One day he held my hand, and it was like I could feel color in the world again after years of seeing in black and white. It wasn't a plan. I never woke up and thought I'm going to have an affair. It was a slow drift toward the only warmth I could find. It turned into an emotional affair. We texted all the time. He made me feel seen and funny and desirable. I know the sexting and the pictures were a mistake, a huge one. But at the time they were proof. Proof that I wasn't invisible. Proof that someone in the world actually wanted me. I was so starved for that feeling I just couldn't stop. I knew my marriage was over. It had been over for years. My plan was to finish my classes, get my professional license, and then leave. I needed to have my own lifeboat before I jumped off the ship he was captaining. But I never got the chance to leave on my own terms. He found the letters. He didn't just find them. He went looking. He searched my computer, dug through my private files until he found what he was looking for. He confronted me and the world just exploded. Through our therapist, he found out who it was, and I was terrified. Not for me, but for my friend. I know my husband's history, the anger he has deep inside him. I was so afraid of what he would do. After that, our house became a prison. He said he wanted to fix things, but it didn't feel like fixing. It felt like he was conquering me all over again. The sex came back, but it was frantic and desperate. It wasn't about us connecting. It was about him marking his territory. He wanted my phone, password, my email password, everything. He wasn't trying to rebuild trust. He was trying to build a surveillance system. I felt like I was suffocating, walking on eggshells every second of the day. He watched my every move. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I said I was sorry 1,000 times. And I played the part of the wife who was desperate to be forgiven. But all I felt was trapped and more alone than ever. So I kept lying. I know how that sounds. It sounds like I'm a terrible person who didn't care who was just playing him. But it wasn't like that. I'd agreed to stop all contact, and I meant it when I said it. But in the days that followed, nothing changed. The surveillance didn't stop. The feeling of being watched, of being on probation, was constant. He wasn't trying to understand why I was so unhappy. He was just trying to make sure I couldn't step out of line again. His love didn't feel like a comfort, it felt like a cage. The other man, he was my only connection to the outside world. He was the one person who knew the truth of how lonely I was. Cutting him off completely felt like cutting off my own oxygen. It was a lifeline I was terrified to let go of because I didn't trust that my husband wouldn't just pull the rug out from under me again. The first time we had a real fight, he packed my bags. What was stopping him from doing it again? So I kept talking to him. Just messages on Snapchat. Stupid, I know. But they were my secret proof that if my whole world fell apart, someone would still know I existed. It wasn't about choosing him over my husband. It was about pure childish terror of being left with nothing and no one. A few weeks after the discovery, my husband suggested we go away for a night. Get a hotel, try to connect. I agreed. I wanted to try. I really, really did. I was exhausted from the tension from performing the role of the good, sorry wife. I thought maybe, just maybe, if we could get out of that house, we could find a piece of what we used to have. The night was fine. It was awkward. We made small talk. We had sex, and it felt like we were both just going through the motions, trying to prove something. I remember lying in the hotel bed later, staring at the ceiling and just feeling this profound emptiness. I felt like I was failing a test I didn't even have the answers to. I eventually fell asleep, just worn out from the effort of it all. When I woke up the next morning, the other side of the bed was empty. His pillow was cold. My first thought was that he'd gone to get coffee. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand next to me. He had left it there, screen lit up. On it was a screenshot of the Snapchat messages between me and the other man. That's it. No note. No angry words scrawled on the hotel stationery. No yelling. He hadn't woken me up to confront me. To fight. To scream. He had waited until I was asleep, gone through my phone, found the proof he was looking for, and left. He just disappeared. I just sat there on the edge of the bed staring at that screenshot. My whole body went numb. It was the doorstep all over again. The ultimate silent rejection. He didn't stay to fight for us. He didn't want to hear my reasons. He found my failure, my imperfection, and he executed the sentence. He abandoned me. The one thing I had spent my entire life being afraid of, he did it in the quietest, coldest way possible. I had to call a taxi to take me home from the hotel, sitting in the back seat like a ghost, my whole life packed into an overnight bag next to me. The aftermath has been a blur of lawyers and dividing up our lives. He tells everyone, our friends, our family, that I blew up our marriage with my affair. He's the victim, the hard-working husband who was betrayed by his unfaithful wife. And on paper, he's right. The facts support his story. He gets all the sympathy. I'm the monster who couldn't keep her legs closed. But they don't see the years of loneliness. They don't see the man who became a roommate instead of a partner. They don't know about the nights I cried myself to sleep because the person lying next to me felt a million miles away. They don't know that the affair wasn't the thing that broke our marriage. It was just the loud noise that happened after years of it silently falling apart. It was a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. I'm not trying to say I'm innocent. I messed up. I lied. I hurt him and I hurt our family, and I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. I hate the person I became in those last couple of years, but I also know that I was drowning. I was a person starving for a single scrap of emotional connection, and I took it from the wrong place because my own home had become a desert. He thinks this story is about my betrayal. He's built his whole new life on the foundation of that narrative. But it's not. This story is about a man who only knew how to own things, not how to love them. He owned a house, a business, and a wife. And when the wife malfunctioned, he got rid of her. From that first night he put my bags on the doorstep, he taught me that his love was conditional. For 20 years I tried to meet those conditions. I performed, I supported, I made myself smaller to fit into the life he was building. And in the end, the moment I failed, he was gone. My greatest fear wasn't cheating or being caught. My greatest fear was being put back on that doorstep, being found unworthy. And that's exactly where he left me. He just used a hotel room this time.
Story 11.
My husband probably thinks our story started the day he found me with another man. But it started years before that in a glass-walled conference room with a boss who kept touching my lower back. Or maybe it started even earlier, when my college professor told me I had a good face for television after I presented a paper on geopolitical theory. For a long time, my life has been a series of men looking at my face and body, but never ever looking at my mind. Don't get me wrong, I love my husband. I know that sounds like a lie right now, but it's the truest thing in all of this mess. He is a good man. He's kind and solid, and when he holds my hand, I feel safe. He comes from a world where things are simple. You work hard, you love your family, you fix what's broken. I fell in love with that simplicity. It felt like an anchor in the storm of my own life. But after a while, an anchor just feels like something holding you down. My career has been a battlefield. At my first big job, my manager would accidentally brush against me in the hallway. He'd make comments about my clothes. I worked twice as hard as any of the men on my team, but in every performance review, he'd praise my positive attitude and ability to brighten up a room. I quit when he cornered me after a client dinner and tried to kiss me. My husband was furious. He held me while I cried and said all the right things, that the guy was a creep, that I was too good for them. But he didn't understand the real poison. The problem wasn't just the harassment. It was that my brain, the thing I was most proud of, was completely invisible to them. I found a new job. Better company, better title, and for a while it was okay. But the feeling slowly crept back in. The condescending smiles from older male colleagues when I spoke up in a meeting. Being asked to take notes because my handwriting was neater. I was fighting every single day just to be taken seriously, to be seen as a strategist and not an ornament. I'd come home exhausted, my mind buzzing with ideas and frustrations, and my husband would be there, bless his heart, wanting to talk about his day, laying tile, or our plans to go kayaking on the weekend. And I'd just say my day was fine, because how do you explain that you're dying of thirst to a man who has never been thirsty a day in his life? Then the big project landed on my desk. And so did he. My coworker. Let's call him Alex. Alex wasn't handsome like my husband. He was thin and wired, always looked like he'd been up for 2 days drinking coffee, which he usually had. But when I talked, he listened. Not just politely waiting for his turn to speak, but really listening. He would argue with me, tear my ideas apart, and force me to defend them. It was brutal and exhilarating. For the first time maybe ever, a man looked at me and saw an equal, an opponent, an ally. We started working late. Our debates over market strategy were electric. It wasn't about flirting, it was about two minds clashing and creating something new. The attraction grew out of that. It wasn't about sex. It was about being seen. One night we had a huge breakthrough and went out for a drink to celebrate. We talked for hours and the conversation shifted from work to everything else. And then he kissed me. It was clumsy and stupid, and I immediately pulled away and ran out of the bar. I went home feeling sick. My husband was asleep, snoring softly, and I just stared at him, my heart pounding with guilt. I knew I had to end it before it even began. It was a mistake. The next day I went to Alex's hotel to tell him just that. But when he opened the door, he had that same look on his face, that look of pure, unadulterated respect. And I just fell apart. That's when the affair started. It lasted for 3 weeks. It was a frantic, desperate, ugly thing. The sex was almost an afterthought, a physical symptom of the intellectual fever we were both running. I felt powerful. I felt brilliant. I felt alive. And I hated myself for it. I was so lost I even made an anonymous post on Reddit, just typing into the void, asking strangers what was wrong with me, why I was doing this when I had a good man at home. I wanted to stop. I just didn't know how. Then came our anniversary, our 10th. I was in my office with Alex, trying to solve one last crisis before I could leave to meet my husband for dinner. I was stressed, and he came up behind me and started rubbing the tension out of my shoulders, whispering some idea about the project into my ear. It wasn't sexual, not really. It was just us. The way we worked. I laughed at something he said, a moment of relief. And that's when the door opened. It was my husband. He was holding the most beautiful bouquet of flowers I'd ever seen. His face, which was usually so open and happy, was just blank. Destroyed. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just walked over to my desk, slammed the flowers down so hard a vase on the credenza jumped, and said, "Happy anniversary." Then he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence in the room was louder than any scream. The fight that night was the worst night of my life. He kept asking why, and I didn't have an answer that would make any sense to him. How could I explain this gaping hole inside me without shattering the image he had of us, of me? So I just cried and said, "I don't know." He asked if I loved him. I said yes, because I do. He asked how many times. I told him the truth. Every word felt like a stone I was handing him to throw at me. The next morning the house was silent. He'd slept on the couch. I found him in the kitchen staring at his phone. He looked up at me and his eyes were cold, like I was a stranger he'd found in his house. "I have one more question," he said, his voice flat. "This guy at work, did he by any chance challenge you intellectually?" My blood ran cold. He had found it. He had found my anonymous scream into the internet, and he was holding it like a knife. The one place I had been completely brutally honest, and he had read it all. The confusion, the self-hatred, the desperate need for validation. He'd seen the ugliest, weakest parts of my soul. "It's not like that," I whispered, but the words were ash in my mouth. How do you explain an identity crisis to a man who has never once questioned who he is? "Isn't it?" he shot back, his voice finally cracking the coldness, giving way to a raw, ragged pain. "It's right there in black and white. You wanted someone to challenge you." "What am I, Megan?" "A simpleton you come home to after you're done playing with the grown-ups." "Am I just the guy who fixes the damn sink and rubs your feet? Is that all I've been for 10 years? "No, God, no," I cried, stepping towards him, but he flinched back like I was on fire. "It was never about you being dumb. You're the smartest person I know about things that matter about real life. This was about my work. It's a snake pit." They look at me and they see a skirt. Alex, he saw my brain. That's all it was at first. He just laughed, a horrible, bitter sound. "That's all it was. You think I'm an idiot. I saw him, Megan. With his hands on you. Don't you dare tell me this was some book club that got out of hand. You fucked him." The word hit me like a slap. He'd never spoken to me like that. Not once in our entire lives together. The dam broke. I was sobbing, trying to force the words out. I know, and I hate myself for it, but it wasn't about love or even sex, not really. It was about feeling powerful for 1 second in a world that makes me feel so stupid and small all day long. I was drowning, and it felt like a life raft. I was your life raft, he finally roared, and the force of it pushed me back. For 10 years, who held you when you came home crying from those shitty jobs? Who told you that you were brilliant and that they were morons? Who was there? Me, I was here. And you threw it all away for some guy who could talk to you about what market shares and quarterly reports. Is that what our marriage was worth? He was right. He had been there. He had always been my safe harbor. And in my desperate search for a different kind of validation, I had set fire to the one place I was ever truly safe. There was nothing I could say. He saw the affair as a verdict on him, and maybe it was. Maybe my needing something he couldn't give me was a flaw in our marriage from the very start. He told me to pack a bag and go to my parents' house. He said he couldn't even look at me. The silence as I threw clothes into a suitcase was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I'd been at my parents' house for 2 days, walking around like a ghost when my mom sat me down. She told me she had gone to see him. I felt a surge of rage. How could she interfere? He's a good man, Megan, she said, her voice quiet. He's broken. He just kept saying he didn't understand, that he thought you were happy. What did you tell him? I asked, my voice shaking. I told him about Robert. Robert, the man she dated before my father. The mechanic with the kind eyes and the easy laugh. The man she left for my dad, a successful lawyer with a country club membership. I had heard his name maybe twice in my entire life. She told me how she had convinced herself it was the right thing to do, the smart thing. She chose status and security. And she told my husband that not a month has gone by in 40 years that she hasn't wondered what her life would have been if she'd stayed with the man she truly loved, the man who made her feel simple and happy. Why would you tell him that? I whispered, horrified. You made it sound like I was going to leave him. No, she said, looking me straight in the eye. I told him that so he would understand that sometimes people with too much ambition get lost. We make terrible, life-ruining mistakes because we're chasing something we think we need, and we trample the things we actually love. I told him that I saw my own stupid, prideful mistake in you, and that he shouldn't let you make it permanent. Her words didn't fix anything, but they shifted something inside me. For weeks I had been telling a story about my own intellectual hunger, my professional frustrations. My mother in one conversation had reframed it as a simple, tragic story of love and regret. She didn't excuse what I did, she just explained it in a language he could understand. It's been a month now. We're talking. Not like we used to. The calls are stiff and painful. We're in therapy both separately and together. Our couples therapist is a no-nonsense woman who says things like, validation is an internal job. I hate it when she says that, mostly because I know she's right. I used Alex to feel powerful, and I used my husband's simple goodness as an excuse. The affair wasn't a symptom of my identity crisis. The affair times was times the crisis. He's trying. I can see him trying. He asked me to explain one of my projects to him the other day. He listened, really listened, and asked questions. They weren't the challenging, incisive questions Alex would have asked, but they were his questions. He was trying to see my world. It was the most loving thing he has ever done for me, and it broke my heart all over again. I don't know if we'll make it. The trust is shattered, maybe forever. He looks at me sometimes, and I can see him replaying that scene in my office. I look at him and see the man whose heart I broke because I was too weak and too selfish to fix myself. I blew up our life looking for a spark, and now all I do is sit in the dark and miss the steady, simple warmth of the home I burned down. I love him. I just don't know if that's enough anymore.
Story 12.
I know how this looks. I know what you've heard, what he's probably told everyone. I'm the villain, the cheating wife who threw away a perfectly good marriage for a fling. I get it. From the outside, that's what it is. He was a good man, a great father, and I broke his heart. But stories are never that simple, are they? His version leaves out the years of silence, the slow, crushing weight of being married to a man who shared my house but not my life. I loved my husband once. I really did. When we were in our 20s, he was everything. He was strong and dependable, the kind of guy who could fix anything and made you feel safe. He was a rock. But the thing about rocks is, they don't change. They don't grow. And I was growing so fast I felt like I was going to burst out of my own skin. I climbed the ladder at my job, I read books, I followed the news, I wanted to talk about politics and art and new business ideas. I'd come home from a 12-hour day, my mind buzzing, and I'd try to tell him about a project I was leading or an interesting article I'd read. He'd just nod, eyes glued to the TV, and say, "That's nice, honey." Then he'd ask what was for dinner. It was like shouting into a void. I begged him to find a passion, to get a career beyond his personal training gigs, to come out with my friends instead of just wanting to hang out with his gym buddies. He was happy. That was the most infuriating part. He was perfectly content with his routine gym, kids, TV, sleep. His contentment felt like a jail sentence for me. I felt so incredibly, profoundly alone, especially at night, lying next to this warm body that felt a million miles away. So I started to build my own world. I threw myself into my fitness. He probably told you I was doing it to get attention, to look good for someone else. The truth is, it was the one thing I could control. My body. I could make it stronger, push it to its limits, and feel powerful for an hour a day when the rest of my life felt so powerless. The new clothes, the makeup, that was armor. It was me trying to look on the outside like the successful, confident woman I was at work instead of the tired, invisible wife I was at home. My phone became my secret garden. It was the only place I could be myself. I'd text my friends, read articles he'd never understand, and just escape. That's why I guarded it so fiercely. It wasn't about hiding a man. It was about protecting the last piece of me that was still mine. And the intimacy. It just died. It wasn't a conscious decision to reject him. How can you be physically close to someone you can't even have a real conversation with? Lying there, letting him touch me felt like the biggest lie of all. It was easier to just say I was tired. Every no was a symptom of a deeper sickness. I was starving for connection, for a single person to see me, the real me, and not just the role I was playing. Then I found one, my coworker Mark. And no, it didn't start the way you think. It wasn't lust or a cheap thrill. It started with a conversation. We were working on a huge project together, spending late nights at the office. One night I made a dry, sarcastic joke, the kind my husband would never get. Mark didn't just laugh. He came right back with a better one. It was like a light turned on in a dark room. He challenged my ideas. He debated with me. He saw me as a smart, capable person, not just a wife and a mom. He was in a dead marriage, too. We started talking, just venting to each other. Soon we were texting. At first it was about work, then it was about our lives, our frustrations, our dreams. Those late-night texts became my lifeline. I'd lie in bed next to my sleeping husband, the blue light of the screen on my face, finally feeling seen. I could tell Mark things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't just someone's wife. I was myself. The work trip was coming up. It was a conference at a tropical resort, a week of intense presentations and networking. Mark and I were both leading a major session. I was nervous and excited. My husband just grunted when I told him about it. He asked if the hotel had a good gym. That was it. No good luck, no I'll miss you, just the gym. That trip changed everything. During the day we were professionals, totally focused. But at night, after the dinners and forced socializing, we'd find a quiet spot by the beach and just talk for hours. We talked about the people we used to be and the people we wanted to become. Under the stars, with the sound of the ocean in the background, all the walls came down. The line between friends and something more just disappeared. It happened. We crossed it. And it didn't feel like a sordid, cheap affair. It felt like coming home. It was a betrayal of my marriage vows, I know that. But it felt like an affirmation of myself, of the woman I had become, who needed more than a quiet life, and a husband who didn't get her. When I got home, the silence in my house was louder than ever. The texting with Mark didn't stop. It got more intense. It was the only thing keeping me sane. A few weeks later, I was lying in bed typing out a long message to him. My husband was next to me, breathing deeply. I thought he was fast asleep. He always was by this time. The house was dark and quiet, the only light coming from my screen. I was smiling at something Mark wrote, feeling that familiar spark of connection. Suddenly, the mattress shifted. Before I could even register what was happening, his arms snaked around me. It wasn't a hug. It was heavy, deliberate. "What are you smiling at?" he asked, his voice low and strange, not sleepy at all. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to angle the phone away, my thumb moving to lock the screen. "Nothing," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Just a funny video." He didn't answer. He just tightened his grip. His other hand came up not to caress my face, but to grab for my wrist, the one holding the phone. I realized with a jolt of pure ice in my veins that he hadn't been sleeping at all. He had been waiting. "It's nothing, just leave it," I said, my voice shaking as I tried to pull my wrist free. It was useless. He's a big guy, a professionally trained martial artist, and when he decided he wanted something, that was it. What happened next wasn't a fight. A fight implies two sides have a chance. This was just him taking what he wanted. He rolled on top of me, pinning me to the mattress with his weight. He started laughing, but it was a horrible, ugly sound. It wasn't a real laugh. It was for show, a performance of being the playful husband, while his eyes were cold and furious. He wrestled the phone from my hand like he was taking a toy from a child. I felt so small, so completely powerless. He held it just out of my reach, my own phone, my private world used as a tool to humiliate me. "Let's see what's so funny," he said, that fake laugh gone now. He unlocked it with my face and started scrolling. The room was dead silent except for the sound of his thumb swiping across the screen. I just lay there frozen, watching his expression shift from suspicion to a kind of dark certainty. I saw his eyes pause, and I knew exactly what he was reading. The text from the trip, the late-night confessions, then his face went hard as granite. I knew he'd found the one where I'd called him the animal. It was a cruel, stupid thing to type, born from a moment of pure frustration, but seeing it through his eyes, I felt sick. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He did something much worse. He looked at me, then at the phone, and pressed Mark's name. He put it on speaker. My blood ran cold. The phone rang once, twice. Then Mark's sleepy voice came through the speaker. "Hey, you." My husband's voice was unnaturally calm. "Is this Mark?" There was a long pause. "Who is this?" "This is her husband," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "I think you and I need to have a little chat about what you've been doing with my wife." I couldn't breathe. I just listened in horror as Mark stammered, denied everything, and then fell silent as my husband read one of our texts out loud. It was over in less than a minute. Mark hung up. My husband slowly lowered the phone and just looked at me. The silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. "So," he said, his voice flat. "Talk." I tried to deny it. I tried to lie. I said we were just friends, that he was just helping me with work stress. I admitted it was an emotional affair, that I'd crossed a line with what I said, but that's all it was. I was talking fast, trying to build a wall of words to protect myself, but he just sat there listening completely unmoved. I realized now he was probably recording me. He had a plan. This man, who I thought was so simple, so straightforward, had been playing a long game. He let me talk myself out, and when I was done, he just said, "The resort? Did you sleep with him?" The question hung in the air. The look in his eyes told me he already knew the answer. There was no point in lying anymore. My whole body sagged, and I finally whispered yes. He nodded once, a short, sharp gesture. He didn't explode. He didn't break anything. He just stood up, went to the closet, and pulled out a suitcase. He threw it on the bed. "Pack your things," he said. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." I was in shock. I never ever thought he would do that. I was the breadwinner. I paid the mortgage. In my arrogant, stupid mind, I thought that gave me power, some kind of control. I thought we would fight, we would go to therapy, we would figure out the mess I'd made. I never thought he would just end it. The fallout was fast and brutal. I left that night and went to a hotel. I called Mark. He didn't pick up. The next day, he sent me a short text saying he was going to try and save his own marriage and that he was sorry. Just like that, the one person I thought truly saw me was gone. I was completely alone. My husband filed for divorce immediately. His lawyer had everything: copies of my texts, a recording of my confession, my financial records. The simple man I had underestimated had been methodically building a case to destroy me. My world collapsed. My friends took sides. My work suffered. All the armor I had built for myself, the career, the money, was turned into a weapon and used against me. We ended up with 50/50 custody of the kids, which is the only thing that matters. But the final humiliation came with the finances. Because I earned so much more than him, I was ordered to pay him spousal support, a significant amount every single month. So now here we are. I work myself to the bone just to keep my head above water to pay for my apartment and his house. He gets to live the exact same life he always wanted, working out, training a few clients, picking up the kids from school, only now I'm paying for it. He's the victim. The strong stoic man who was wronged. He probably tells everyone he's a wreck, but from what I hear, he's never been happier. He thinks he won. He blew up my world, shattered the life I had built, and left me with the pieces. He's not wrong. He did. But he will never understand that he was the one who lit the fuse. He'll never see the thousands of tiny moments, the years of quiet neglect and intellectual loneliness that made the whole thing so fragile in the first place. He didn't just lose a wife. He lost a woman he never really knew. And I lost myself trying to be someone he could love, and then lost everything else when I finally found her.
Story 13.
I'm sure you've heard her side of the story. I know how she paints me. I'm the monster-in-law, the overbearing matriarch who ruined her perfect little family. It's an easy story to tell, and an even easier one to believe. But it's not the truth. The truth is, I was the only one trying to hold that family together. My son Michael is a good man. I know every mother says that, but it's true. He has a heart that's almost too big for his own good. He's kind and gentle, but he's also sensitive. He feels things so deeply, and he trusts people too easily. I've always had to be the strong one, the one who looks out for him, because he'd give his whole world to someone who didn't deserve it. And that's exactly what he did. When he met her, Sarah, I tried to be open-minded. I really did. But the red flags were there from the very beginning. She told us all these stories about her past, a long list of bad relationships with narcissists and toxic men. I remember thinking, if everyone you've ever dated is a narcissist, maybe you're the common denominator. But Michael was so happy. He said she was different. So I welcomed her. I invited her to family dinners. I taught her my recipes. I treated her like a daughter. But I saw things that worried me. She didn't really have her own life. As soon as she started dating Michael, she dropped all her old friends and hobbies to become whatever she thought he wanted. It wasn't healthy. It was like she was a chameleon playing a part. And sometimes the mask would slip. The fight started pretty quickly. He would call me sometimes in the middle of the night, completely distraught. She would get an idea in her head and just explode. The smallest disagreement would turn into a huge drama. She was always threatening to leave, packing a bag and running off to a hotel. He would be a wreck, blaming himself, and I would have to talk him down for hours. He was trying so hard to give her a stable life, something she clearly never had. It all came to a head one night. They had a massive fight, the worst one yet. Michael finally had enough of the constant threats and told her to just go. He actually kicked her out of the house. He was heartbroken, but I thought maybe this is for the best. Maybe he finally sees how unstable she is. 3 days later, he called me. He told me he'd bought a ring and proposed. I couldn't believe it. He said he thought a real commitment, a real show of stability, was what she needed to feel secure. And of course, she accepted the engagement ring. She knew she had him. Things were quiet for a little while, but the pattern started again. More fights, more drama. Then came the final dramatic exit. She packed her bags and checked into a hotel, telling him it was over for good this time. Michael was about to give up. He was exhausted. And then, like a miracle for her and a nightmare for him, she called him from the hotel room. She was pregnant. What was he supposed to do? He's an honorable man. I raised him to take responsibility for his actions. So he did what he thought was the right thing. They went down to the courthouse and got married before the baby was born. No party, no celebration. It was a business transaction to give his child a name. He was determined to make it work for the baby. I knew then and there that my job was far from over. I knew he was going to need me more than ever. When my grandson Leo was born, I packed a bag and drove straight there. Michael called me and he sounded terrified. He said Sarah was a wreck. And he was right. When I walked into that house, it was pure chaos. Dishes piled up, laundry everywhere. And Sarah, she was a ghost. She was crying all the time, just hysterical. She could barely hold her own son. She was drowning in what everyone now calls postpartum depression, and my grandson was paying the price. So I did what any loving grandmother would do. I rolled up my sleeves and I took over. I sent Michael to get some sleep. I cleaned the house and I took care of that baby. I made sure Leo was fed, that he was clean, that he was held and comforted. Sarah was trying to breastfeed, but it wasn't working. The baby was crying from hunger and she was crying from stress and pain. It was a disaster. I helped her set up a pumping schedule so that I, or Michael, could give the baby a bottle and she could get some rest. It was the only practical solution. Sometimes I had to physically take Leo from her arms. She would be holding him while she was sobbing, just shaking, and her anxiety was making him scream. A baby can feel that. So I'd say, "Here, honey, let me take him. You go take a shower and calm down." I was trying to help. I was trying to teach her. My own son understood. He saw how much she was struggling. He would sneak the baby to her later when she was calm and had a moment of clarity. He was just trying to keep the peace. I stayed for 2 months. 2 months of cooking, cleaning, and taking care of a newborn around the clock while also trying to counsel a hysterical new mother. It was exhausting, thankless work. I saw that she didn't just need help with the baby. She needed guidance on how to be part of a family. Our family. We're close. We talk, we support each other, we respect our elders. She came from a broken home and didn't understand that. One afternoon when the baby was sleeping and Michael was at the store, I decided it was time for a real talk, woman to woman. I sat her down at the kitchen table. I made her a cup of tea. I told her gently that being a mother was the hardest job in the world and that she wasn't failing, she just needed to accept help. I explained that in our family we lean on each other, and that means listening to the wisdom of those who have done it before. I told her I wasn't trying to criticize her, I was trying to give her the tools she needed to succeed for Leo's sake. I was offering her my support, my lifetime of experience. I thought it was a breakthrough moment. I thought she would finally understand that I was on her side. She just stared at me, her eyes cold. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked right through me and said, "I don't need your wisdom. I need you to leave my house." I just sat there holding my lukewarm cup of tea and stared at her. It was like a slap in the face. After 2 months of breaking my back for her child, for my son, that's what I got. Not a thank you, not a "I appreciate you, but leave my house." The venom in her voice was something I'd never heard before. It was cold, hard, and final. I felt the air get sucked out of the room. All the warmth I had tried to build, all the support I had offered just vanished. Before I could even respond, we heard the key in the front door. Michael walked in holding a bag of groceries, a big smile on his face. The smile died the second he saw us. He could feel the tension. It was thick enough to choke on. "What's going on?" he asked, looking back and forth between us. Sarah didn't even look at him. She just kept her eyes locked on me. "I've asked your mother to leave," she said, her voice flat. Michael looked at me confused. "Mom, what happened?" I stood up, my hands shaking a little. "I have no idea, Michael. We were just talking. I was telling her how much we all love her and want to help her, and she just turned on me." I tried to keep my voice steady to show him I was the calm, rational one. "She seems to think my help is some kind of attack." That's when Sarah finally broke. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "An attack! You call this help?" she finally yelled, her voice cracking. "You haven't helped. You've invaded. You took over my home. You took over my child. You walk in here and decide I'm not a good enough mother, so you just push me aside. I can't hold my own son without you hovering over me, telling me I'm doing it wrong, that my anxiety is hurting him." I was stunned. This was how she saw it. My 2 months of thankless round-the-clock work to save her and my grandson were an invasion. My guidance was abuse. She was twisting everything. "I was trying to give you a break," I said, my voice rising to match hers. "You were a mess. You couldn't stop crying. The baby was screaming. What was I supposed to do? Just stand by and watch you both fall apart?" "You were supposed to ask me what I needed," she shrieked. "You were supposed to support me, not replace me. You act like he's your baby, not mine." She turned to Michael, her eyes pleading. "Are you hearing this? Are you going to let her talk to me this way in our own home? Are you ever going to stand up for me?" Michael just stood there frozen like a deer in headlights. He looked from her face to mine, his expression pained. He hates conflict. His gentle heart can't take it. He just wants everyone to be happy. "Sarah, let's all just calm down," he stammered. "Mom was just trying to..." But he never got to finish. The look on Sarah's face when he said that, it was pure devastation. It was the moment she gave up on him. She didn't scream anymore. She just shook her head, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "I see," she whispered. Then she turned and walked upstairs without another word. That was the end. I packed my bags in silence while Michael tried to talk to her through the locked bedroom door. He begged her to come out to talk about it. But there was nothing left to say. She had poisoned his mind, convinced his gentle heart that my love was control. She used me as the scapegoat for a marriage that was broken from the very start. I kissed my son goodbye on the cheek and told him to call me. Driving away from that house, I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt a deep, profound sadness for him and for my grandson trapped in there with her. The next few weeks were a nightmare of silence and short, strained phone calls. Michael would tell me they were working on it, but his voice was hollow. I knew it was over. Then the call I was dreading finally came. He was sobbing so hard I could barely understand him. She had filed for divorce. And the reason she gave him his failure to stand up for her against his family. Against me. A mother who loved them. a woman who sacrificed 2 months of her life for them. That was my reward. It got uglier from there. She cut me off completely. My calls went to voicemail, my texts were left unread. The final petty little knife twist came one evening when I was scrolling through my phone. I noticed our family group chat was quieter than usual. Then I realized why. She had left the group. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Such a childish, passive-aggressive display. It was her final act of cutting Michael's family out of her life, and by extension out of Leo's life. Now she's raising my grandson away from his family, denying him the love and support system he deserves. She posts pictures online of their new life, flaunting her freedom and her healing. She's the brave single mom who escaped a toxic situation. And I'm the villain. I'm left with a broken-hearted son who I have to painstakingly piece back together, and a grandson who I barely get to see, who will grow up hearing stories about his horrible, controlling grandmother. She destroyed my son's family, and somehow I am the one who gets the blame. People will always believe her side of the story because it's simpler. It's easier to point a finger at the meddling mother-in-law, but they didn't see the late-night phone calls, the unstable girl who ran to hotels, the hysterical new mother who couldn't cope. They didn't see me cleaning her house, feeding her child, and trying to teach her how to be a part of a family that loved her. All I ever did was try to hold it all together. All I ever did was love them too much. And for that I lost everything.